A black woman gave up her seat on a plane to a millionaire writhing in pain. But when he felt her calming presence beside him, he fell hard and made her an offer that could flip his entire world. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Zuri Johnson was exhausted. The 32-year-old hospice nurse had just completed a grueling 72-hour shift comforting patients in their final moments. Her deep brown eyes, usually so vibrant, were shadowed with fatigue as she shuffled through the crowded airport. She had one thought pushing her forward: home. After 2 weeks volunteering at an understaffed rural hospice facility, she was finally heading back to Chicago. The boarding call for her flight echoed through the terminal. Zuri adjusted her worn backpack and joined the line of passengers. Her modest dress and practical shoes stood in stark contrast to the business travelers with their sleek luggage and pressed suits. Not that she minded. Years of working in hospice care had taught her the true value of things, and designer labels weren't on that list. "Now boarding Group A," announced the gate agent. Zuri glanced at her economy ticket. Group D. She would be among the last to board. Sighing, she settled against a nearby pillar to wait, pulling out a dog-eared paperback. That's when she heard the commotion. "Sir, please, you need a wheelchair!" A flight attendant's voice rose above the terminal noise. "I don't need a damn wheelchair," growled a male voice, deep and strained with pain. "Just get me on the plane!" Zuri looked up to see a tall man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit doubled over, his face contorted in agony. Despite his obvious pain, he radiated authority and wealth, from his handcrafted leather shoes to his platinum watch that probably cost more than her yearly salary. "Sir, I insist," the attendant began. "I said no." The man straightened slightly, revealing a handsome face with sharp features now pale and sweaty. He clutched his abdomen, swaying dangerously. Nursing instinct took over. Zuri was at his side in an instant, her fatigue forgotten. "Excuse me?" she said to the flustered attendant. "I'm a nurse. Let me help." Before either could respond, the man's knees buckled. Zuri caught him with surprising strength for her 5'6" frame, guiding him to a nearby seat. "Kidney stone," he managed through gritted teeth. "Had them before." Zuri nodded, her professional demeanor taking over. "Deep breaths," she instructed, her voice calm and authoritative. "When did the pain start?" 2 hours ago, he gasped. "Getting worse. Need to get home." "My doctor." "I understand, but flying with this level of pain isn't wise," Zuri said gently. "The altitude changes can intensify the pain, and if it's blocking your ureter completely—" "I know the risks," he cut her off. "I have important meetings tomorrow. Can't miss them." The gate agent approached nervously. "Mr. Whitman, we're holding the flight, but we need to board now if you're traveling." Whitman. The name clicked in Zuri's mind. Xavier Whitman, tech billionaire and CEO of Whitman Industries. She'd seen his face in magazines and news segments, one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the country. "I'm boarding," he insisted, trying to stand again. Zuri made a quick decision. "What's your seat number?" "1A," the gate agent supplied. "First class? And there's no medical staff on board?" The agent shook her head. "No, ma'am." Zuri took a deep breath. "Mr. Whitman, I'm in seat 23C. I'll switch with you. Economy is closer to the lavatories and I can help monitor your condition during the flight." Xavier's pain-filled eyes met hers with surprise. "Why would you do that?" "Because you're in pain and it's what I do," she replied simply. "I'm a hospice nurse. Comfort is my specialty." For a moment, his guard seemed to drop, vulnerability replacing the hard edges of his face. Then another wave of pain hit and he doubled over again. "Fine," he gasped. Within minutes, the gate agent had switched their seats in the system, and Zuri found herself guiding the billionaire to her economy seat, ignoring the curious stares of other passengers. She helped him settle by the window, ensuring he had water and explaining to the flight attendants his condition. "I should introduce myself," she said once they were seated. "Zuri Johnson." "Xavier Whitman," he replied through clenched teeth, "though you already knew that." "Only after the gate agent said your name," Zuri admitted. "I don't follow business news much." Xavier studied her face, seemingly searching for deception. Finding none, he relaxed slightly. "Refreshing," he murmured. As the plane taxied, Zuri dug through her backpack and pulled out a small pouch. "Essential oils," she explained, seeing his skeptical expression. "Peppermint can help with pain and nausea." Without waiting for permission, she placed a few drops on a tissue and handed it to him. "Breathe deeply." Surprisingly, he complied, inhaling the sharp, clean scent. "Also, pressure points," she continued, taking his right hand. Her cool, smooth fingers pressed firmly between his thumb and forefinger. "This may help reduce the intensity." Xavier watched her, fascination momentarily overriding his pain. Her touch was professional yet somehow personal, confident without being invasive. As a man accustomed to people either intimidated by his wealth or eager to exploit it, her straightforward care was novel. "Why hospice?" he asked suddenly, trying to distract himself as the plane lifted off. Zuri considered the question. "Because everyone deserves dignity in their final moments," she finally said, "and because it teaches you what matters." "Which is?" "Not what most people think." Her eyes met his, steady and unimpressed by his status. Not stock portfolios or corner offices. Under different circumstances, Xavier might have been offended. Instead, as another wave of pain crashed through him, he found her presence oddly anchoring. Throughout the 3-hour flight, she quietly tended to him, offering pressure point techniques, ensuring he stayed hydrated and simply being a calm presence beside him. When his pain became overwhelming, she distracted him with stories of her patients, not the sad details of their deaths, but the beautiful moments of clarity and connection they experienced. She spoke of an elderly woman who reconciled with her estranged daughter in her final days, and a former opera singer who performed one last aria from her hospice bed. "People reveal their truest selves at the end," she told him. "All the pretense falls away." "And what do they regret most?" Xavier asked, genuinely curious. "Working too much," Zuri replied without hesitation. "Missing moments with loved ones. Choosing career over connection." She paused. "I've never had a patient say they wished they'd spent more time at the office." Xavier fell silent, her words hitting closer to home than he cared to admit. At 38, he had built an empire but had little else in his life. His marriage had ended 2 years ago, his friends were mostly business associates, and his family relationships were strained at best. As the plane began its descent, Xavier realized his pain had subsided to a dull ache, still present, but manageable. More surprisingly, for the first time in years, he'd spent hours not thinking about work, deadlines, or competitors. "We'll be landing soon," Zuri said, gathering her belongings. "You should see your doctor immediately. I can help arrange transportation." "Have dinner with me," Xavier interrupted. Zuri blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" "Dinner, tonight, as a thank you." When she hesitated, he added, "Just dinner, I promise." She studied him, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Whitman?" "Xavier." "Xavier," she amended. "I appreciate the offer, but it's unnecessary. This is literally my job." "Not on your day off, on a commercial flight, giving up a first-class seat," he countered. "Please, just dinner." The plane touched down with a slight bump, and passengers around them began the ritual of retrieving items and powering on phones. Xavier's phone immediately buzzed with notifications, but for once he ignored them, his eyes still on Zuri. She sighed. "I'm exhausted. I've been working for 3 days straight. I probably smell like hospital disinfectant, and I just want to go home and sleep for 12 hours. "Tomorrow, then," her eyebrow raised. "You're persistent." "It's how I built my company," he said, allowing a small smile despite the lingering pain. "One of my better qualities according to some, one of my worst according to others." That earned him a slight smile in return. "I'll think about it," she finally said, handing him a business card from her wallet. "My cell's on there, but you should really see your doctor first." The plane reached the gate and passengers began to disembark. Xavier watched as Zuri gathered her things, struck by a strange reluctance to see her go. In just a few hours, this woman had shown him more genuine care than he'd experienced in years, with no agenda, no expectations, and no awareness of what she might gain from him. "Zuri," he called as she stood to leave. She turned, those tired but kind eyes meeting his. "Thank you," he said simply. Her smile, genuine and warm, transformed her exhausted face. "You're welcome, Xavier. I hope you feel better soon." As he watched her disappear down the aisle, Xavier Whitman, a man who had everything and valued nothing, felt something shift within him. He didn't know it yet, but this chance encounter with a compassionate hospice nurse was about to challenge everything he thought he knew about success, value, and what it meant to truly live. Xavier Whitman's private doctor confirmed what Zuri had suspected: a 5mm kidney stone, large enough to cause excruciating pain but not quite large enough to require surgical intervention. After a CT scan, pain medication, and strict orders to drink more water than he thought humanly possible, Xavier was sent home to his penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. 3 days passed before the stone finally passed. 3 days of pain interspersed with periods of relief, during which Xavier found his thoughts repeatedly drifting to the kind nurse who had given up her first-class seat. He'd wanted to call her immediately, but something held him back. Perhaps it was the painkillers clouding his judgment. Or maybe it was the awareness that she'd seen him at his most vulnerable, a state he rarely allowed anyone to witness. On the 4th day, feeling more himself, Xavier picked up her business card from his nightstand. "Zuri Johnson, RN, Lakeside Hospice Care," it read in simple, professional lettering. No frills, no attempt to impress, just like her. He dialed before he could second-guess himself. "This is Zuri," she answered on the 3rd ring, her voice warm but tired. "It's Xavier Whitman, from the plane." A pause. "The kidney stone billionaire. How are you feeling?" He smiled at her description. "Better. It passed yesterday." "Good. Drink your water." "Yes, ma'am," he replied, amused by her no-nonsense tone. "About that dinner." Another pause. "You were serious about that?" "Very. Are you free tomorrow night?" "I'm working a night shift tomorrow," Zuri said. "Actually, I'm working most nights this week." "Lunch, then?" She laughed softly. "You really don't give up, do you?" "Not when I want something," he admitted. "And I want to thank you properly." "Fine," she conceded. "Thursday. I finish my shift at noon so I could meet you at 1 p.m. somewhere." "Perfect. I'll send a car for you." "That's not necessary." "Please," he interrupted. "It's the least I can do." After a moment she agreed and they arranged the details. Xavier hung up feeling oddly satisfied, as if he'd accomplished something more significant than scheduling a lunch. His executive assistant, Marcus, entered his home office with a stack of papers. "Sir, the board is requesting an update on the Singapore deal and Ms. Chen from legal needs signatures on these by end of day." Reality crashed back. Xavier straightened in his chair, pushing thoughts of Zuri aside. "Tell the board we're on schedule, and I'll review these now." Yet even as he immersed himself in work, part of his mind remained fixed on Thursday. Zuri stared at her closet on Thursday morning, fatigue weighing her limbs after a 12-hour shift. She'd helped ease an elderly man's transition during the night, holding his hand as he took his final breaths while his family slept in the waiting room. It had been peaceful, as these things went, but emotionally draining nonetheless. Now she faced the unexpected challenge of what to wear to lunch with a billionaire. "This is ridiculous," she muttered to herself, pulling out a simple navy dress she usually saved for special occasions. "It's just a thank-you lunch." Yet as she showered away the hospital scent and carefully applied light makeup, Zuri couldn't quite convince herself this was an ordinary meal. When her phone chimed with a text announcing the car's arrival, her stomach fluttered with unexpected nerves. The car wasn't what she expected. Rather than an ostentatious limousine, a sleek but understated black sedan waited curbside. The driver, a middle-aged woman with a kind smile, held the door for her. "Ms. Johnson? I'm Clara. Mr. Whitman sent me to bring you to the Terrace." The Terrace was one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants, nestled on the rooftop of a historic building with panoramic views of the city and lake. Zuri had walked past it many times but never imagined dining there. Xavier was waiting when she arrived, rising from his table as she approached. Without the haze of pain, she was struck by how imposing he was, tall and broad-shouldered, with intensity radiating from him like heat from a furnace. His tailored suit probably cost more than her monthly rent, but he wore it with the casual ease of someone who didn't think about such things. "Zuri," he greeted her, his deep voice softer than she remembered. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for the invitation," she replied, taking the seat a waiter pulled out for her. "Though this seems excessive for a simple thank you." Xavier smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. "I don't do anything by halves." "So I've gathered." She glanced around at the elegant setting, the white-clothed tables spaced far apart for privacy, the understated luxury that spoke of old money and discretion. "This is quite a place." "The chef is a genius," Xavier said, watching her. "And the view isn't bad either." Zuri met his gaze steadily. "I appreciate the gesture, but I should be clear about something. I didn't help you for a reward. I would have done the same for anyone." "I know," he said simply. "That's what makes it so unusual." A waiter appeared with water and menus, explaining the day's specials with rehearsed precision. When he departed, Xavier leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about your work," he said. "Hospice care must be challenging." The question surprised her. Most people avoided the topic of her job, uncomfortable with its proximity to death. "It is," she admitted, "but also deeply rewarding. I help people find peace in their final moments. I ensure they don't suffer, that they maintain dignity." "Why hospice specifically? Why not a specialty where you save lives?" Zuri considered the question, appreciating that he'd asked directly rather than dancing around it. "Because everyone focuses on saving lives, but few focus on making the end meaningful. And in hospice, I do save something, not lives, but the quality of remaining time." Xavier nodded slowly. "I've never thought about it that way. Most people don't until they need it." She sipped her water. "What about you? Why technology?" "Problem solving," he answered immediately. "I see inefficiencies in the world and fix them. Create solutions that improve lives." "Is that what drove you to start Whitman Industries? Improving lives?" A shadow crossed his face. "Initially, now it's—" He paused, searching for words. "More complicated." The waiter returned for their orders. Zuri chose a simple salad while Xavier ordered for both of them, requesting several dishes to share after confirming she had no dietary restrictions. "You'll want to try everything," he explained. "Chef Marcel's food is an experience." When they were alone again, Zuri steered the conversation back. "You were saying it's more complicated now." Xavier studied her, as if assessing how much to reveal. "Success changes things," he finally said. "When you build something that grows beyond your expectations, it takes on a life of its own. The company needs constant feeding, more innovation, more growth, more market share." "Sounds exhausting." "It is." He smiled ruefully. "But it's what I created." "And what about outside of work? Family? Friends?" "Divorced," he said curtly. "No children, few true friends, many acquaintances who want something from me." "That sounds lonely," Zuri observed, her voice free of judgment. Xavier looked momentarily startled by her directness. "I suppose it is," he admitted. "I don't think about it much." "Maybe you should." Their food arrived, small, artfully arranged plates that looked more like art than sustenance. Zuri tentatively tried each dish, surprised by the explosion of flavors. "This is amazing," she conceded. Xavier watched her enjoy the food with evident pleasure. "Tell me about your family," he said. Zuri's expression softened. "My parents live in Atlanta. Dad's a high school music teacher. Mom's a librarian. I have a younger brother who's a social worker in Baltimore. We're close, talk every week at least." "You come from a family of helpers," Xavier observed. "I suppose we are," she agreed. "We were raised to believe that a life in service to others is a life well lived." "And do you believe that?" "I do." She met his gaze. "But service takes many forms. What you do, creating technology that solves problems, that's service too, if done with the right intentions." Xavier fell silent, thoughtfully chewing a bite of seared scallop. When he spoke again, his voice had a different quality to it, less guarded, more genuine. "The Singapore deal we're working on now, it started as a way to bring affordable internet access to remote regions. Now it's become about market domination and stock prices." Zuri sensed he rarely shared such honest reflections. "What happened?" "The board, investors, quarterly reports." He shrugged. "The machinery of business. And you can't change that? It's not that simple." "Isn't it?" Zuri challenged gently. "You're Xavier Whitman. From what I've read on the Flight magazine, you built this company from nothing. If anyone can redefine its direction, it's you." Xavier stared at her, something shifting in his expression. "Most people don't speak to me this way." "I'm not most people," she replied simply. "No," he agreed. "You certainly aren't." The meal continued, their conversation flowing more easily. Xavier found himself sharing details about his childhood, growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Detroit, his early interest in computers, the scholarship that got him to MIT, the garage where he built his first prototype. In turn, Zuri told him about her journey to nursing, the patients who had changed her perspective, the small joys and profound sorrows of her daily work. She spoke without self-consciousness, her passion evident in every word. As dessert arrived, a delicate confection of chocolate and berries, Xavier realized with a start that 2 hours had passed. He couldn't remember the last time he'd sat through a meal without checking his phone or thinking about work. "I've kept you too long," he said. "You must be tired after your shift." "I am," Zuri admitted. "But this was nice. Unexpected, but nice." When the check came, Xavier tucked his credit card in without looking at the total. "May I see you again?" The question hung between them, transforming their thank-you lunch into something else entirely. Zuri studied him, her expression thoughtful. "Why?" The directness of her question caught him off guard. "Because I enjoy your company," he said honestly. "Because you see things differently than anyone else in my life." "I'm not sure we make sense, Xavier. Different worlds, different priorities." "Maybe that's exactly why we should explore this further." She hesitated, then reached for her purse. "I'll think about it." As they left the restaurant, Xavier guided her with a light touch at the small of her back. "I'll have Clara drive you home." "That's not necessary." "Please," he interrupted softly. "It would make me feel better." Zuri relented, suddenly aware of how tired she truly was. At the curb, before she got into the waiting car, she turned to face him. "Thank you for lunch. It was lovely." "The pleasure was mine," Xavier replied, his eyes intent on hers. "Will you let me know about seeing each other again?" Zuri nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "I will. Get some rest, Xavier, and drink your water." He laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise even him. "Yes, ma'am." As the car pulled away, Xavier remained on the sidewalk, watching until it disappeared into traffic. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar stirring within him, not ambition or determination or the competitive drive that had built his empire, but something simpler and yet infinitely more complex. It felt remarkably like hope. 3 days passed before Zuri texted Xavier. 3 days during which she debated the wisdom of getting involved with a man whose world was so different from hers. 3 days of replaying their lunch conversation, remembering the way his guarded expression had softened when she asked about his company's original mission. "I'd like to see you again," she finally wrote, simple and direct. "But I should warn you, my schedule is complicated." His response came within minutes. "I own a calendar company. I think I can work around your schedule." Zuri smiled at his message. "You don't own a calendar company." "I could by tomorrow if it would impress you." "It wouldn't." "Noted. When are you free?" They arranged to meet that weekend when Zuri had a rare Saturday off. Xavier suggested dinner, but Zuri countered with a different proposal. "There's a community garden project in Englewood I volunteer with when I can. We're planting seedlings Saturday morning. Not glamorous, but important work." There was a longer pause before his response arrived. "What time and what should I wear?" Saturday dawned clear and mild. Zuri arrived at the community garden early, greeting the other regular volunteers, mostly neighborhood residents, a few nursing colleagues, and some local university students. She'd half expected Xavier to cancel, to realize that digging in dirt alongside strangers in one of Chicago's most challenged neighborhoods wasn't how billionaires typically spent their weekends. But at precisely 9 a.m., a black SUV pulled up to the curb. Xavier emerged wearing jeans and a plain gray t-shirt, still obviously expensive, but the most casual she'd seen him. He surveyed the vacant lot transformed into garden beds with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You came," she said, walking over to greet him. "I said I would." He seemed almost offended that she doubted him. Most people wouldn't consider this a fun date. A slight smile tugged at his lips. "Is that what this is? A date?" Heat rose to Zuri's cheeks. "A figure of speech." "Ah." His eyes held hers a moment longer than necessary. "Well, I'm here and ready to work. What do we do?" Zuri introduced him to Miss Evelyn, the 76-year-old neighborhood matriarch who coordinated the garden project. The older woman assessed Xavier with shrewd eyes. "So you're the rich man Zuri's been talking about," she said bluntly. "You know anything about growing food?" "Not a thing," Xavier admitted, "but I'm willing to learn." Miss Evelyn nodded approvingly. "Honesty. That's good. Come on then." For the next 3 hours, Xavier worked alongside Zuri, Miss Evelyn, and a dozen other volunteers. He dug holes for tomato seedlings, carefully transferred delicate herbs to larger containers, and helped repair the garden's irrigation system. His movements were precise and methodical, approaching each task with the same intensity he likely brought to boardroom negotiations. Zuri watched him from the corner of her eye as she worked nearby, noting how he listened attentively to Miss Evelyn's instructions, how he engaged a shy 10-year-old boy in conversation about the different vegetables they were planting, how his initial stiffness gradually gave way to genuine engagement. By midday, Xavier's designer jeans were stained with soil and sweat dampened his shirt. When Miss Evelyn announced lunch break, he looked almost disappointed. "The community center provides lunch for volunteers," Zuri explained, leading him toward a nearby building. "Nothing fancy, but good." "I'm not concerned about fancy," Xavier replied. "I'm starving." Lunch was simple. Sandwiches, fruit, and homemade lemonade served in the center's multi-purpose room. Xavier sat beside Zuri at a long table, listening as the other volunteers discussed neighborhood issues and future garden plans. "We need a better fence," said a young woman named Tasha. "Kids from the high school keep trampling the edge beds at night." "And more rain barrels," added an elderly man. "Water bills getting too high." Xavier listened quietly until Miss Evelyn turned to him. "What do you think, Mr. Rich Man? You seeing what we're doing here?" The table fell silent, all eyes turning to Xavier. Zuri felt a flicker of concern at Miss Evelyn's directness, but Xavier met the older woman's gaze steadily. I see a community taking ownership of its food security and creating beauty in a place that's been neglected, he said. I see people working together across generations, and I see an irrigation system that could be much more efficient with some simple adjustments. Miss Evelyn's face broke into a wide smile. Man knows what he's looking at, she declared to the table at large. After lunch, Xavier pulled Zuri aside. The center's roof is in bad shape, he observed, and they're using ancient computers in that office. Resources are limited, Zuri said simply. Xavier nodded, his expression thoughtful. Before he could respond further, Miss Evelyn called everyone back to work. By late afternoon, the day's planting was complete. Volunteers began dispersing, some stopping to thank Xavier for his help, others simply offering a nod of acknowledgement. Miss Evelyn approached as Xavier and Zuri gathered their belongings. "You coming back next Saturday?" she asked Xavier directly. He glanced at Zuri before answering. "If I'm welcome." "You worked hard, didn't complain. That makes you welcome." Miss Evelyn patted his soil-stained arm. "Bring some decent work gloves next time. Those soft hands of yours gonna be blistered tomorrow." After she walked away, Xavier flexed his hands, already showing red marks where blisters would indeed form. "Worth it," he said quietly. They walked together toward his waiting SUV, a comfortable silence between them. "Coffee?" Xavier suggested. "Or are you tired of me already?" "Coffee sounds good," Zuri agreed. "But maybe somewhere we can sit outside? It's too nice to be indoors." 20 minutes later, they sat at a small cafe in a nearby neighborhood, far from the upscale establishments Xavier typically frequented. The wooden chairs were weathered, the tables mismatched, but the coffee was excellent and the patio garden lush with early summer blooms. "Thank you for today," Xavier said, watching Zuri over the rim of his mug. "It's been enlightening." "How so?" "I invest millions in philanthropic projects, but I rarely see the direct impact." He set down his coffee. "Today I planted 37 tomato seedlings that will feed actual people in a few months. There's a concreteness to that I wasn't expecting." Zuri smiled. "That's why I love the garden project. In hospice work, I deal with endings. The garden is about beginnings, growth, continuation. Balance," Xavier nodded. "You found balance." "I try." She studied him. "What about you? Any balance in your life?" Xavier's expression turned rueful. "Not much. Work consumes most of my time. By necessity or choice." The question hung between them, Xavier taking his time to consider it. "Both," he finally admitted. "The company needs attention to thrive, but I also use work to avoid other aspects of life." "Like what?" "Like meaningful connections, vulnerability." His eyes met hers. "Things that can't be controlled or quantified." Zuri felt a flutter in her chest at his honesty. "That's remarkably self-aware." "I've had a lot of therapy," he replied with a slight smile. "My ex-wife's parting gift, the name of her psychologist." "And did it help?" "Intellectually, yes. I understand my patterns. Acting on that understanding is a work in progress." A notification sound interrupted them. Xavier glanced at his phone and frowned. "Problem?" Zuri asked. "The Singapore deal. Some complications with the regulatory framework." He sighed, putting the phone away without responding. "It can wait until tomorrow." "Are you sure? I don't mind." "I'm sure," he interrupted firmly. "Today has been... I don't want to end it yet." The simple honesty of his statement warmed her. "Then don't." They spent another hour at the cafe, their conversation flowing from serious topics to lighter ones. Favorite books, travel experiences, childhood memories. Zuri found herself laughing at Xavier's dry wit, a side of him she hadn't glimpsed before. As evening approached, Xavier reluctantly noted the time. "May I drive you home?" Zuri hesitated, then nodded. "I'd like that." In the car, Xavier's driver maintained a discreet silence as they traveled to Zuri's neighborhood. Comfortable but modest. far from the lakefront luxury where Xavier resided. When they reached her apartment building, Xavier walked her to the entrance. "I have a foundation board meeting tomorrow," he said, "but I'd like to see you again soon." "I'm working nights all week," Zuri replied, "but I finish early Friday morning." "Breakfast then? I know a place with the best beignets outside of New Orleans." "That sounds perfect." Zuri shifted slightly, suddenly aware of the intimate space between them, of Xavier's height and the gentle intensity of his gaze. "Zuri," he said softly, "today was the first day in years I didn't think about work for hours at a time. Thank you for that gift." Before she could respond, he leaned down and brushed his lips against her cheek, a brief, gentle touch that felt more meaningful than any passionate kiss could have. "Rest well," he murmured, pulling back. "I'll see you Friday." Zuri watched him return to his car, her skin tingling where his lips had touched. As the SUV pulled away, her phone chimed with a text message, already counting the hours until Friday. X. Inside her apartment, Zuri kicked off her shoes and sank onto her sofa, mind swirling with conflicting emotions. The day had revealed a different Xavier than the powerful CEO she'd first met, a man willing to get his hands dirty, to listen and learn, to engage with a world entirely outside his experience. It was attractive. Dangerously so. Her phone rang, the screen displaying her mother's name. "Hey, Mom," she answered. "There you are. I've been trying to reach you all day. How was your gardening project?" Zuri hesitated, not ready to share Xavier with anyone yet, even her mother. "It was good, productive. You sound different. Did something happen?" Mothers, Zuri thought with a sigh. Nothing escaped them. "I met someone," she admitted. "Oh?" Her mother's interest was immediately piqued. "A nice someone?" "I think so. It's very new." "Well, I want to hear all about him when you're ready. Is he a nurse too?" Zuri laughed softly. "No, Mom. He's in technology." After promising more details soon, Zuri ended the call and headed for the shower, washing away the day's dirt while replaying moments with Xavier in her mind. The careful way he'd handled the seedlings, his thoughtful questions to Miss Evelyn, the genuine interest in his eyes when she spoke. Dangerous indeed, she thought as she dried off. But perhaps worth the risk. Across town, Xavier entered his penthouse, immediately shedding his soil-stained clothes and heading for the shower. As hot water cascaded over him, he found himself smiling at the memory of Miss Evelyn's blunt questions, of the shy boys' excitement when their tomato plants were in the ground, of Zuri's face in the dappled sunlight of the cafe patio. His phone rang as he wrapped a towel around his waist. The caller ID showed his chief operating officer. "Marcus," he answered. "It's Saturday night. What's so urgent?" "The Singapore regulators are pushing back on our data privacy protocols. The legal team needs direction before the Asian markets open tomorrow." Xavier walked to his floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the glittering city below. 6 months ago, even 1 month ago, he would have immediately switched to work mode, spending his Saturday night on conference calls and reviewing documents. Tonight, his mind kept returning to 37 tomato plants and Zuri's smile. "Tell legal to draft a proposal that exceeds their privacy requirements by 20%, he said decisively. "And Marcus, unless the building's on fire, don't call me again until Monday morning." He ended the call before his COO could respond, turning away from the city view to look at his dirt-embedded fingernails and the beginning blisters on his palms. Worth it, he thought, echoing his earlier sentiment. Definitely worth it. Friday morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the windows of Café Beignet, a small, authentic New Orleans-style eatery tucked away in a quiet corner of Chicago. Xavier had arrived early, securing a table by the window. He checked his watch, 7:58 a.m. Zuri would be here any minute, coming straight from her night shift. He'd barely slept, his mind consumed with the Singapore deal complications. The regulatory issues had escalated, and his executive team was pushing for compromises that would prioritize profit over the original mission of providing affordable internet access. The old Xavier would have agreed without hesitation. The new Xavier, the one influenced by a certain hospice nurse with unwavering principles, found himself resistant. The cafe door opened, and Zuri entered. Even after a 12-hour shift, she carried herself with quiet dignity. Her scrubs were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a soft blue sweater, her braids pulled back in a loose ponytail. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but her smile when she spotted him lit up her entire face. Xavier stood as she approached, suddenly aware of his racing heart. "Good morning." "Morning," she replied, sinking gratefully into the chair across from him. "Sorry if I'm not the best company. It was a long night." "Difficult cases?" She nodded. A 42-year-old mother of 3, pancreatic cancer. Her kids came to say goodbye. Xavier reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "I don't know how you do it. Some days, I don't either," she admitted. "But then I remember what a privilege it is to help people through their most vulnerable moments." She gently squeezed his hand before withdrawing hers. "Enough about my night. Tell me about these famous beignets." On cue, a server arrived with a plate piled high with powdered sugar-dusted pastries and 2 cups of chicory coffee. Zuri's eyes widened appreciatively. "The owner is from Louisiana," Xavier explained. "He uses his grandmother's recipe. Try one." Zuri bit into a beignet, closing her eyes as the warm, pillowy dough melted in her mouth. "Oh my goodness," she murmured. "That's incredible." Xavier smiled, enjoying her pleasure more than the pastry itself. "Worth getting up early for?" "Absolutely." She took a sip of the strong coffee. "Though I haven't actually been to sleep yet. You should have told me. We could have rescheduled." "I wanted to see you," she said simply, her directness catching him off guard again. "Besides, this is perfect post-shift food, sugar and caffeine, a nurse's best friends." They ate in comfortable silence for a few moments, Zuri visibly relaxing as the coffee did its work. Xavier watched her, struck again by her natural beauty. No designer clothes or expensive makeup, just genuine warmth and those expressive eyes that seemed to see through his carefully constructed facade. "You're staring," she observed, licking powdered sugar from her fingers. "Sorry," he said, not looking away. "You're beautiful." A blush darkened her cheeks. "Sleep deprivation looks good on me?" "Everything looks good on you." The words escaped before he could temper them. "You're different from anyone I've ever known, Zuri." She studied him, her expression turning thoughtful. "Different how?" "Authentic, unimpressed by wealth or status, completely comfortable in your own skin." Xavier leaned forward slightly. "Do you know how rare that is in my world?" "I can imagine," she replied. "But I think you're giving me too much credit. I have my own insecurities like anyone else." "Such as?" She hesitated, then said, "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough. If comforting the dying is enough when there's so much need in the world. From where I'm sitting, you do more good in a day than most people do in a lifetime." Zuri shook her head. "There you go again, overestimating me. I don't think that's possible." His phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. Xavier ignored it. "You should get that," Zuri said. "It might be important." "It's always important," he replied with a rueful smile. "That's the problem." The phone buzzed again. With a sigh, Xavier checked the screen. "It's Marcus, my COO. The third call in 10 minutes. "Answer it," Zuri urged. "I don't mind." With a reluctant nod, Xavier accepted the call. "This better be urgent, Marcus." Zuri watched as Xavier's expression darkened, his posture stiffening as he listened to whatever crisis had erupted. She sipped her coffee, trying not to eavesdrop on his clipped responses. "No, absolutely not. I don't care what the board thinks. That was never the intention of this project." He pinched the bridge of his nose, frustration evident. "Fine. I'll be there in 30 minutes." He ended the call, looking genuinely apologetic. "I'm sorry. There's a situation I need to handle in person." "Work emergency?" "The Singapore deal. The original mission was to provide affordable internet access to underserved communities, but now the board and investors are pushing to prioritize profit margins." Xavier's jaw tightened. They want to limit access to premium customers and charge rates that would exclude most of the population we originally intended to help. Zuri considered him thoughtfully. "And you disagree?" "I do, but I'm being outvoted by people who see quarterly profits as the only measure of success." "You're the CEO," Zuri pointed out. "Don't you have the final say?" "It's complicated." Xavier ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign of inner conflict. "I answer to the board, and the board answers to shareholders who want maximum returns on their investments." "At the expense of your company's ethics?" The bluntness of her question seemed to startle him. "That's a very direct way of putting it." "I'm a direct person," Zuri replied with a small smile, "especially when I'm tired." Xavier's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it and grimaced. "I really need to go." "I understand," she said, and she did. Whatever was happening clearly had him troubled. "Go save your company's soul." He looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. "Have dinner with me tonight, at my place. I'll cook." "You cook?" she asked, unable to hide her surprise. "I'm a man of many hidden talents," he replied, a hint of his usual confidence returning. "Please say yes. I want to make up for cutting this short." "Yes," Zuri agreed, finding herself reluctant to end their time together despite her exhaustion. "Text me the address and time." Xavier stood, dropping enough cash on the table to cover their meal several times over. Before leaving, he leaned down and, with a gentleness that contrasted with his powerful presence, kissed her cheek again, this time lingering just a fraction longer. "Get some rest," he murmured close to her ear. "I'll see you tonight." Zuri watched him stride out of the cafe, phone already at his ear, transforming back into the commanding CEO she'd first glimpsed on the plane. Yet she'd seen beneath that exterior now, had glimpsed the man struggling to reconcile his original vision with the realities of corporate pressure. With a deep yawn, she finished her coffee and gathered her things. Sleep was calling, and tonight promised to be interesting. Xavier's penthouse kitchen gleamed with high-end appliances that rarely saw use. Tonight, however, every surface was occupied. Cutting boards laden with chopped vegetables, pans simmering on the professional-grade stove, and a bottle of expensive red wine breathing on the counter. He moved with surprising confidence between tasks, the precision that served him in business translating well to cooking. The emergency board meeting had been contentious, ending with a temporary compromise that satisfied no one. Xavier had bought himself a week to find a solution that would honor both the original mission and the financial realities of the project. Now, as evening fell over Chicago, he found himself more concerned with the perfect sear on sea scallops than billion-dollar deals. The domesticity of the moment struck him as both foreign and oddly satisfying. His home security system alerted him to Zuri's arrival in the lobby. "Send her up," he instructed the doorman through the intercom. Minutes later, a soft knock sounded at his door. Xavier wiped his hands on a kitchen towel and took a deep breath, suddenly nervous. He opened the door to find Zuri looking rested and radiant in a simple black dress, her hair styled in loose waves around her shoulders. "Hi," she said, looking a bit uncertain herself. She held out a small plant. "I brought you this instead of wine. It's a peace lily, easy to care for and good for air quality." Xavier accepted the plant, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "Thank you. Come in." Zuri stepped inside, her eyes widening as she took in his home. The penthouse was spectacular by any standard. floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing panoramic lake and city views, minimalist furnishings in neutral tones, and original artwork adorning the walls. Despite its obvious luxury, it felt strangely impersonal, more like a high-end hotel suite than a home. "This is quite a place," she said diplomatically. "It's sterile," Xavier replied, recognizing the truth in her careful assessment. The decorator called it curated minimalism. "I call it what happens when you let someone else design your living space." Zuri laughed, the sound warming the austere space. "At least it's easy to clean." "True. Would you like a tour before dinner?" Xavier guided her through the penthouse, the formal living room where he never sat, the media room equipped with technology that would make most theaters envious, the office where he spent most of his time when home. Zuri noticed there were no personal photographs, no mementos or items that told the story of the man who lived here. "What's behind these?" she asked, pointing to closed double doors. "The master suite," Xavier replied. "Bedroom, bathroom, closets. May I?" When he nodded, Zuri pushed open the doors. Unlike the rest of the penthouse, the bedroom showed signs of actual habitation: a book on the nightstand, a sweater draped over a chair, a pair of running shoes by the dresser. The space was dominated by a massive bed and more of those incredible windows, currently showcasing a sunset painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "This feels more like you," Zuri observed. "It's the only room the decorator didn't finish," Xavier admitted. "She quit when I rejected her third proposal for custom draperies." Zuri turned to him with an amused smile. "You're difficult to work with?" "So I've been told." His expression turned more serious. "The truth is, I've never cared much about my surroundings as long as they're functional. The company has always been my focus." "A home should be more than functional," Zuri said gently. "It should reflect who you are, what matters to you." Xavier considered her words. "I'm not sure I know how to create that." "You start by filling it with things that have meaning, that tell your story." She gestured around the room. "What would the Xavier Whitman Museum exhibit include?" The question caught him off guard, making him think about what artifacts from his life truly mattered. Before he could respond, a timer chimed from the kitchen. "Saved by the bell," he said with a slight smile. "Dinner's ready." In the kitchen, Xavier plated the meal with the same precision he applied to everything: seared scallops over risotto, roasted vegetables arranged artfully on the side. "This looks amazing," Zuri said as he guided her to the dining table, already set with fine china and crystal. "I'm impressed." "Don't be too impressed until you've tasted it," Xavier warned, pulling out her chair. "Cooking is relatively new for me." "When did you learn?" "After my divorce," he replied, pouring wine into her glass. "I found myself alone in this big place, working until all hours. Eventually, I got tired of takeout. Cooking became therapeutic." "It can be," Zuri agreed, taking her first bite. Her eyes widened in appreciation. "This is delicious, seriously." Xavier felt an unexpected surge of pride at her approval. They ate slowly, conversation flowing easily between them. Zuri told him about her afternoon, how she'd slept for a few hours, called her parents, and gone for a long walk by the lake before preparing for their evening. In turn, Xavier described the tense board meeting and his struggle to stay true to the original vision for the Singapore project. "What would happen if you simply refused to compromise?" Zuri asked. Xavier set down his fork, considering the question. "Potentially, a vote of no confidence from the board, removal as CEO, significant financial losses. Are those outcomes worse than betraying what you believe in?" Her question hung in the air between them, simple yet profound. Xavier felt something shifting inside him, a recalibration of priorities that had begun the moment he met her on that plane. "A week ago, I would have said yes without hesitation," he admitted. "The company has been my identity for so long, but now—" He met her gaze across the table. "Now I'm not so sure." Zuri reached across, her fingers brushing his. That sounds like progress to me. The moment was charged with something deeper than attraction. A recognition, perhaps, that they were at the beginning of a journey neither had anticipated, but both were increasingly willing to explore. As the evening continued, Xavier found himself more relaxed than he could remember being in years. After dinner, they moved to his rarely used terrace, where the night air was cool but pleasant. Side by side in comfortable chairs, wine glasses in hand, they talked about everything and nothing: favorite books, childhood dreams, the simple pleasures that made life worthwhile. "I've never brought anyone here before," Xavier confessed after a comfortable silence. "Not even my ex-wife. This penthouse was purchased after our divorce." "Why me?" Zuri asked softly. Xavier turned to look at her, his expression open and vulnerable in a way few people had ever witnessed. "Because with you, I don't feel the need to perform. To be the successful CEO or the tough negotiator or whatever role I'm expected to play." "And who are you when you're not performing?" "I'm still figuring that out," he replied honestly. "But I'd like to figure it out with you beside me." The simple declaration hung in the night air, more intimate than any passionate avowal could have been. Zuri set down her wine glass and moved to stand before him, her eyes reflecting the city lights. "I'd like that too," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Xavier rose to meet her, closing the distance between them. This time, when he leaned down, his lips found hers in a kiss that began gently but quickly deepened, expressing everything they weren't yet ready to say in words. Zuri's arms wound around his neck as she responded with equal fervor, her body melting against his. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Xavier rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he murmured. Zuri pulled back slightly, meeting his gaze. "I don't think that's a good idea. Not yet." Instead of the disappointment or pressure she half expected, Xavier nodded in understanding. "You're right," he said. "Some things shouldn't be rushed." His respect for her boundaries only made Zuri more certain she was falling for this complex man. "Rain check?" she offered with a smile. "Definitely." Xavier brushed his thumb across her cheek. "But the night doesn't have to end yet. Tell me more about the community garden. What are you planting next?" Over the next 3 weeks, Xavier and Zuri fell into a rhythm that worked around their demanding schedules. Morning coffees before her shifts, late dinners after his meetings, weekend mornings at the community garden, where Xavier had become a regular, much to Miss Evelyn's approval. She'd even started calling him X instead of Mr. Richman, a sign of acceptance that Zuri assured him was significant. They were taking things slowly, savoring the discovery of each other. Xavier found himself increasingly drawn to Zuri's world, the community connections, the meaningful work, the authentic relationships. He'd never experienced anything like it. His life had always been transactional, focused on achievement and acquisition rather than connection. Tonight was different, though. Tonight, Zuri was entering his world for the first time. Whitman Industries' annual charity gala was one of Chicago's premier social events, raising millions for educational initiatives in underserved communities. In previous years, Xavier had treated it as a necessary business function. This year, with Zuri as his date, he found himself actually looking forward to it. His driver pulled up to Zuri's apartment building precisely at 7. Xavier straightened his bow tie and checked his watch, a nervous habit he couldn't seem to shake. When Zuri emerged from her building, he momentarily forgot to breathe. She wore a floor-length gown in deep emerald that complemented her skin tone perfectly. The design was elegant, yet simple. No excessive beading or dramatic flourishes, just clean lines that accentuated her natural grace. Her braids were swept up in an intricate style, revealing the smooth curve of her neck and shoulders. Xavier stepped out of the car to greet her, suddenly feeling like an awkward teenager rather than a powerful CEO. "You look incredible," he said, his voice lower than usual. "Thank you." Zuri smiled, a hint of nervousness in her eyes. This isn't my usual scene. I had to call my friend Tasha for emergency fashion advice. She guided you well. Xavier offered his arm, which she took with a small smile. Ready to brave the lion's den? Are they that bad? Some are, he admitted as they settled into the car. Chicago's elite can be judgmental, but the event raises money for a good cause. Zuri adjusted the small clutch purse on her lap. Tell me about the educational initiatives. What exactly are we supporting tonight? As Xavier described the scholarship programs and technological resources the foundation provided, he was struck by Zuri's thoughtful questions. Unlike many of his usual companions at such events, she was genuinely interested in the impact rather than the prestige of association. You've created something meaningful, she said when he finished explaining. You should be proud. It was my mother's idea, actually, Xavier admitted. She was a public school teacher in Detroit. When I made my first million, she insisted I use some of it to help kids like I had been, smart, but without resources. Zuri's eyes softened. You never mentioned your mother before. She passed away 5 years ago. Cancer. Xavier looked out the window, memories surfacing. She would have liked you. I wish I could have met her. So do I. He turned back to Zuri, taking her hand. She was the most authentic person I knew. Until you. The car pulled up to the gala venue, a historic Chicago hotel transformed for the evening with elegant lighting and floral arrangements. Photographers lined the entrance, capturing arriving guests for society pages and corporate PR. Xavier felt Zuri tense slightly beside him. We can use the side entrance if you prefer, he offered. Avoid the cameras. Zuri straightened her shoulders. No, this is your event. We'll do it properly. Xavier's admiration for her grew as she stepped out of the car with perfect poise, taking his arm and facing the flashing cameras with a serene smile. They paused briefly for photos, then proceeded inside to the grand ballroom. The space was filled with Chicago's elite, business leaders, politicians, old money families, and celebrities. Conversations hushed briefly as Xavier entered with Zuri, curious eyes assessing his unexpected companion. Xavier, darling. A silver-haired woman in her 60s approached, air-kissing both his cheeks. The event is magnificent, as always. Thank you, Margaret. May I introduce Zuri Johnson? Zuri, this is Margaret Winslow, chairwoman of our foundation's board. Margaret's practiced smile remained fixed as she assessed Zuri. How lovely to meet you, dear. And how did you and Xavier connect? Through the foundation's work, perhaps? The question was carefully crafted to determine Zuri's status and background. Xavier felt a flicker of irritation at the obvious social maneuvering. Actually, I saved his life on a plane, Zuri replied with perfect composure. He was having a kidney stone attack, and I'm a nurse. Margaret blinked, clearly not expecting such a direct response. How dramatic. It certainly was, Xavier agreed, placing his hand at the small of Zuri's back. If you'll excuse us, Margaret, I see some people I need to introduce Zuri to. As they moved away, Zuri whispered, Was that okay? I probably should have been more vague. It was perfect, Xavier assured her. Margaret thrives on social hierarchies. You completely disrupted her categorization system. The next hour passed in a blur of introductions. Xavier watched with increasing admiration as Zuri navigated each interaction with grace and authenticity. When asked about her work, she spoke of hospice care with such compassion and conviction that even the most status-conscious guests were visibly moved. During a brief moment alone at their table, Xavier leaned close to her ear. You're amazing, you know that? You belong in any room you choose to enter. Zuri smiled, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the chandeliers. I'm just being myself. Exactly. Xavier's gaze was intense. That's the most courageous thing anyone can do in a room like this. Their moment was interrupted by a tall, elegantly dressed woman approaching their table, her calculating eyes fixed on Xavier. "Hello, Xavier," she said coolly. "It's been a while." Xavier's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "Vanessa, I didn't know you'd be here tonight. The Tremaine Foundation always supports educational causes." Her gaze shifted to Zuri, assessment in her eyes. "Won't you introduce me to your friend?" "Of course, Zuri Johnson. This is Vanessa Tremaine, my ex-wife." Zuri maintained her composure admirably, extending her hand. "Pleased to meet you." Vanessa's handshake was brief. "Likewise. So, how did you two meet?" Xavier doesn't typically move in healthcare circles. The slight emphasis was subtle but unmistakable. Xavier tensed, but before he could respond, Zuri answered with perfect poise. "We had a chance encounter on a flight. Sometimes life presents unexpected connections." How serendipitous. Vanessa's smile didn't reach her eyes. Xavier always did have a talent for surprising choices. "I consider it one of my better qualities," Xavier replied smoothly. "If you'll excuse us, Vanessa, the program is about to begin." As she walked away, Zuri turned to Xavier. "So that's your ex-wife?" "Yes. I apologize for her behavior." "No need. I've dealt with far worse from family members of patients." Zuri's expression was sympathetic. "She still has feelings for you." Xavier looked surprised. "Vanessa? No. Our marriage ended because neither of us truly had feelings for the other. It was a strategic partnership that made sense at the time." "That's sad." "It was pragmatic," Xavier corrected. "Vanessa wanted access to my tech world connections for her family's investment firm. I wanted entree into Chicago's old money circles to legitimize Whitman Industries. And love wasn't a consideration?" Xavier hesitated. "We respected each other. We were compatible in terms of goals and lifestyle. I thought that was enough." "And now?" His eyes met hers, intense and honest. "Now I know it isn't. Not even close." The moment was interrupted by the evening's MC calling for attention. The formal program began. Speeches about the Foundation's work, testimonials from scholarship recipients, and the obligatory recognition of major donors. Xavier was called to the stage to give his annual address. In previous years, he'd delivered a carefully scripted speech focusing on innovation and opportunity. Tonight, looking out at the audience and finding Zuri's warm eyes, he set aside his prepared remarks. "Good evening," he began. "We're here tonight because education changed my life. As the son of a single mother teaching in Detroit's public schools, I saw firsthand the difference that one caring mentor, one opportunity, one scholarship can make." He paused, his gaze finding Zuri again. "But recently I've been reminded that education is just the beginning. True success isn't measured in wealth accumulated or power attained. It's measured in lives touched, in authenticity lived, in courage shown when facing difficult choices." The ballroom was silent, guests exchanging surprised glances at this departure from Xavier's usual polished corporate rhetoric. "Our foundation's work matters because every child deserves not just an education, but a chance to become their truest self, to discover what genuinely matters to them, not what society dictates should matter." As he continued speaking from the heart, Xavier watched Zuri's expression, pride, affection, and something deeper reflected in her eyes. When he concluded to enthusiastic applause, he felt lighter somehow, as if speaking his truth had lifted a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying. The rest of the evening passed in a pleasant haze. The foundation raised a record amount, exceeding last year's total by nearly 30%. Xavier attributed this partly to his more personal speech, which had resonated with donors in an unexpected way. As they finally made their way to the car shortly after midnight, Zuri looked tired but happy. "You were wonderful tonight," she said as they settled into the back seat. "That speech. It wasn't what they expected, was it?" "No," Xavier admitted. "It wasn't what I expected either. You're changing me, Zuri." "I'm not trying to change you. I know that's precisely why it's happening." The car pulled away from the hotel, gliding through Chicago's nearly empty streets. Xavier gazed at Zuri's profile in the passing streetlights, struck again by her beauty. Not just physical, but the beauty of her spirit, her integrity, her complete comfort with herself. "Would you like to come back to my place?" he asked softly. "Just to talk, maybe have a nightcap. I'm not ready for this evening to end." Zuri turned to him, her expression thoughtful. After a moment, she nodded. "Neither am I." At the penthouse, Xavier poured them each a small glass of cognac. They moved to the terrace where the night air was cool but pleasant. Zuri slipped off her heels with a sigh of relief, curling her feet under her on the comfortable outdoor sofa. "Tell me about your mother," she said after a comfortable silence. "You mentioned she was a teacher?" Xavier smiled, memories washing over him. "She was extraordinary. Raised me alone after my father left when I was 3. Worked 2 jobs sometimes to make ends meet, but never complained. She saw potential in everyone. Her students, her neighbors, strangers on the bus. She sounds wonderful. She was. And stubborn." He chuckled. "When I made my first million and wanted to buy her a house, she refused. Said her modest home was perfectly adequate and I should use the money to help others instead. That's how the foundation started." "I wish I could have known her," Zuri said softly. "She would have adored you." Xavier set down his glass. "You remind me of her in some ways. The same integrity, the same clarity about what matters." Zuri studied him in the soft lighting. "You have those qualities too, Xavier. They might have gotten buried under expectations and business pressures, but they're there. I see them." Her words touched something deep within him. Impulsively, he reached for her hand, bringing it to his lips. "Thank you for seeing me. The real me, not the CEO or the billionaire or whatever label the world has attached." "Thank you for letting me see you," she replied, her eyes holding his. "I know that's not easy for you." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken emotions. Xavier leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. Instead, Zuri met him halfway, their lips connecting in a kiss that quickly deepened with shared hunger and a sense of rightness that surprised them both. When they finally parted, breathless, Xavier rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling for you, Zuri Johnson," he whispered, hard and fast and completely. Zuri pulled back slightly, meeting his gaze with a mixture of emotion in her eyes. "I'm falling for you too," she admitted, "and it terrifies me." "Why?" "Because our worlds are so different, because I don't know if there's room for me in your life long term, because I'm afraid of getting hurt when reality sets in." Xavier cradled her face gently. "My world is changing because of you, for the better. And there will always be room for you in my life, as long as you want to be there." Zuri smiled, but uncertainty lingered in her eyes. "It's not that simple. Nothing ever is." "Some things are," Xavier insisted. "How I feel about you is the simplest truth I know right now." She kissed him again, softly. "Let's take it one day at a time. See where this leads us." As they sat together under the stars, Xavier felt a certainty he'd never experienced before. Whatever challenges lay ahead, and he knew there would be many, this woman was worth fighting for, worth changing for, worth becoming his truest self for. For the first time in his life, Xavier Whitman was falling in love not for what it could bring him, but for how it could transform him into the man he was meant to be. The conference room fell silent as Xavier finished speaking. 14 board members and senior executives stared at him with expressions ranging from shock to outrage. The Singapore deal proposal, projected on the screen behind him, had been completely restructured. Instead of prioritizing premium customers and maximizing profit margins, Xavier's new plan maintained the original mission: affordable internet access for underserved communities, with a longer-term approach to profitability. This is unacceptable. Franklin Pierce, the longest-serving board member, finally broke the silence. We'd be reducing projected first-year returns by almost 30%. But ensuring sustainable growth for the next decade, Xavier countered calmly, and fulfilling the promise we made when we first announced this initiative. Promises don't satisfy shareholders, Patricia Chen from legal interjected. The fiduciary responsibility of this company is to maximize value. Xavier's expression remained composed, though his knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the table. Our responsibility is to balance short-term gains with long-term vision. This plan does exactly that. Marcus Taylor, his COO and longtime ally, shifted uncomfortably. Xavier, I understand your concerns, but perhaps we could find a middle ground, something that addresses both profitability and accessibility. This is the middle ground, Xavier replied firmly. I've spent weeks analyzing every possible scenario. This approach supports our mission while still delivering respectable returns. Not maximum returns, but ethical ones. Franklin snorted. Ethical returns? Since when did Whitman Industries become a charity? Xavier fixed the older man with a steady gaze. We've always claimed to be a force for positive change. It's in our mission statement. It's in our marketing. It's in the promises we make to consumers and communities. If those are just empty words, we should be honest about it. The tension in the room was palpable. For 8 years, Xavier had been the driving force behind Whitman Industries' meteoric rise. His vision, his determination, his ruthless pursuit of growth had transformed a garage startup into a global technology leader. Now he was advocating for a path that prioritized social impact over maximum profit, and his leadership team couldn't quite believe what they were hearing. I move that we table this discussion, Franklin finally said. Give everyone time to review the numbers more thoroughly. The regulatory deadline is tomorrow, Xavier reminded them. We either proceed with this plan or revert to the original proposal, which I cannot and will not support. Patricia Chen exchanged glances with several other board members. Are you issuing some kind of ultimatum, Xavier? I'm stating my position clearly. If the board chooses to proceed with the original plan, you'll need to do so with a different CEO. The declaration hung in the air, heavy with implication. Xavier had never threatened to resign before, not even during the company's most difficult periods. You can't be serious, Marcus said quietly. I've never been more serious. Xavier surveyed the room, making eye contact with each person. I founded this company to solve real problems, to make technology accessible to those who needed it most. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that. I lost sight of that. I'm not willing to continue down that path. Franklin Pierce's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This is about that woman, isn't it? That nurse you've been seen with. She's filled your head with some bleeding heart nonsense. Leave Ms. Johnson out of this. Xavier cut him off, his voice dangerously quiet. My decision is based on 8 weeks of analysis and a return to the foundational principles of this company. Your attempt to dismiss it as emotional manipulation is both inaccurate and inappropriate. The elderly board member subsided, but his expression remained mutinous. I suggest we take a short break, Marcus intervened. 30 minutes to review the new projections, then reconvene for a vote. Xavier nodded sharply and stood. 30 minutes. As the others filed out, Marcus remained behind, waiting until they were alone. What are you doing, X? He asked, using the nickname from their college days. You've worked too hard to throw it all away on principle. I'm not throwing anything away, Xavier replied. I'm course correcting. Because of her? Xavier sighed, running a hand through his hair. Zuri helped me see something I'd lost sight of, yes, but this isn't about her. It's about who I want to be, what kind of company I want to lead. Marcus studied his friend's face, noting the unfamiliar peace in his expression despite the professional crisis unfolding. You really care about her. I love her, Xavier said simply, the first time he'd voiced the realization aloud. But that's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing it because it's right." 30 minutes later, the board reconvened. The vote was narrower than Xavier had anticipated, 8-6 in favor of his restructured plan. He had won, but the division within his leadership team was clear. As the meeting adjourned, Franklin Pierce lingered. "This isn't over, Whitman," he said quietly. "You've chosen a dangerous path." Xavier met the older man's gaze steadily. "Perhaps, but it's one I can live with." Zuri was finishing her charting when her phone buzzed with a text from Xavier. "Free for dinner tonight? Need to see you." The unusually brief message concerned her. Normally, Xavier's texts were thoughtfully composed, often with a touch of dry humor. This sounded urgent. "Everything okay?" she responded. "Yes and no. Tell you in person, 7 p.m.? I'll be there." Throughout her remaining shift, Zuri found herself distracted by worry. For the past 2 months, Xavier had been grappling with the Singapore deal dilemma. They'd discussed it extensively, with Xavier torn between shareholders' expectations and his own rekindled commitment to ethical business practices. By 7, Zuri had changed from her scrubs into simple jeans and a blouse, her hair loose around her shoulders. When she arrived at Xavier's penthouse, he greeted her with an intensity that confirmed her concerns. "What happened?" she asked once they were settled on the terrace, glasses of wine in hand. Xavier took a deep breath. "I restructured the Singapore deal to prioritize accessibility over maximum profit. Presented it to the board today as a non-negotiable condition of my continued leadership." Zuri's eyes widened. "You threatened to resign?" "I did. And? They approved my plan. Barely." Xavier took a sip of his wine. "But the fallout has already begun. Our stock dropped 6% this afternoon when news leaked. Franklin Pierce is rallying other board members against me, and Marcus thinks I've lost my mind." Zuri processed this information, a knot of guilt forming in her stomach. "Because of me," she said quietly. "They think I've influenced you against the company's interests." Xavier set down his glass and moved to sit beside her, taking her hands in his. "You have influenced me, but not in the way they think. You've reminded me of who I wanted to be before success and ambition clouded my vision. But your company will be stronger for this recalibration," Xavier insisted. "Maybe not immediately in terms of stock price, but in purpose, in integrity, in the impact we make." Zuri searched his face, finding no regret in his expression despite the professional turmoil he described. "Are you sure this is what you want?" "I'm sure." He squeezed her hands gently. "For the first time in years, I feel completely aligned with my decisions. Whatever happens next, I know I've chosen the right path." They were quiet for a moment, the city lights twinkling around them as twilight deepened into night. Zuri felt the weight of Xavier's choice, and her inadvertent role in it, settling over her. "I never meant to disrupt your life," she said softly. Xavier cupped her face gently. "You haven't disrupted it. You've enhanced it, clarified it." His eyes held hers intently. "I love you, Zuri. I think I have since that day on the plane when you gave up your seat without a second thought." The declaration hung in the air between them. Zuri's heart raced, a tumult of emotions flooding through her: joy, fear, exhilaration, doubt. "You don't have to say it back," Xavier continued when she remained silent. "I just needed you to know, especially today when everything else feels uncertain." Zuri placed her hand over his where it rested against her cheek. "I love you too," she whispered, "and that terrifies me. Your world is changing because of me." "Because of us," he corrected gently. "Because what we have has reminded me what matters." She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "What happens now with the company?" "Now we implement the restructured deal. We demonstrate that ethical business can also be good business, just with more reasonable timelines and metrics." Xavier sighed. "It won't be easy. There will be resistance, probably attempts to remove me if stock prices don't recover quickly. Are you prepared for that?" "I am." He pulled back slightly to meet her eyes. Whatever happens with Whitman Industries, I've made the right choice. Not just professionally, but personally. Zuri nodded slowly, accepting his certainty. Then I'm with you. Whatever comes next. Xavier's phone rang, the screen lighting up with Marcus's name. He glanced at it, then back at Zuri. Take it, she encouraged. I know today is critical. Xavier answered, his expression growing more serious as he listened. When? He asked. I see. Yes, I'll issue a statement. Thank you for the heads up. He ended the call, his jaw tight. What's wrong? Zuri asked. Franklin Pierce has called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. He's formally challenging my leadership. Xavier set the phone down. It's happening faster than I expected. What will you do? Fight. Make my case. Remind them that Whitman Industries was built on innovation and long-term vision, not quarterly profits. He ran a hand through his hair. I won't lie. This could get ugly. Zuri moved closer, wrapping her arms around him. Whatever happens, you're not alone. Xavier held her tightly, drawing strength from her presence. That makes all the difference. They stayed like that for a long moment. The city spread out below them, their futures suddenly uncertain yet somehow clearer than ever before. Stay tonight, Xavier murmured against her hair. Not because of what's happening tomorrow, just because I want to fall asleep with you beside me and wake up the same way. Zuri pulled back to meet his gaze, her decision made. Yes, she said simply. Later, as they lay together in Xavier's massive bed, Zuri's head resting on his chest, she listened to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Despite the professional storm gathering around them, he seemed peaceful, more centered than she'd ever seen him. Any regrets? She whispered in the darkness. Xavier's arms tightened around her. Not a single one. Even if tomorrow goes badly? Even then. He kissed the top of her head. I spent years building a company at the expense of building a life. Thanks to you, I'm finally correcting that imbalance. Zuri traced patterns on his skin, thinking of the patients she'd cared for, the regrets they'd shared in their final days. None had ever wished for more time at the office, more money, more status. They'd wished for more moments of connection, more authenticity, more love. Whatever happens tomorrow, she said softly, we'll face it together. Together, Xavier echoed, the word a promise in the quiet night. As Zuri drifted toward sleep, she reflected on the unlikely path that had brought them here. A kidney stone, a first-class seat exchange. Two people from different worlds finding in each other exactly what they hadn't known they were seeking. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew with sudden certainty that this man, complicated, evolving, courageously vulnerable, was worth every risk. Morning would bring its trials. The board would meet, decisions would be made, professional consequences would unfold. But here now, in the peaceful darkness, none of that mattered. What mattered was this connection, this love that had transformed them both in unexpected ways. Life, Zuri knew from her hospice work, was too short for anything less than authentic living. Xavier was choosing that path, whatever the cost, and she was choosing to walk it with him for as long as their journey lasted. The morning headlines were brutal. Whitman Industries stock plummets amid CEO's ethical stance. Xavier Whitman, visionary leader or corporate liability. Board showdown looms at tech giant. Zuri scrolled through the news articles on her phone while Xavier dressed for the emergency board meeting. He moved with deliberate calm, selecting a charcoal suit that projected authority without ostentation. They're calling you everything from a misguided idealist to a corporate traitor, she said, looking up from the phone. Xavier adjusted his tie in the mirror. What are they saying about you? Zuri hesitated. That I'm influencing your judgment. The hospice nurse who brought a billionaire to his knees is one of the kinder descriptions. His expression hardened. I'm sorry they're dragging you into this. I'm more worried about you. She set the phone aside and approached him, straightening his already perfect tie. Are you ready for this? As ready as I'll ever be. He covered her hands with his. Whatever happens today, please remember that this is my choice, my company, my decision, my responsibility. I know, she said softly. But I can't help feeling that if we'd never met, I'd be continuing down a path that was slowly killing something essential in me. Xavier's gaze was intense. You didn't cause this decision, Zuri. You simply helped me see what I already knew was right. She nodded, though the guilt wasn't entirely assuaged. Call me as soon as it's over? I will. He kissed her, a lingering connection that conveyed everything words couldn't. As Xavier headed for the door, Zuri called after him. Xavier? He turned. No matter what happens in that meeting, I'm proud of you. Something in his expression shifted, a vulnerability few people ever witnessed. That means more than you know. After he left, Zuri busied herself making the bed, brewing coffee, trying not to check the news every 5 minutes. She had the day off from the hospice, a rare weekday freedom that now felt like torture as she waited for updates. Her phone rang just after 11. Expecting Xavier, she was surprised to see her mother's name on the screen. Mom? Everything okay? Zuri Marie Johnson, why am I reading about you in the Chicago Tribune? Her mother's voice was a mixture of concern and curiosity. There's a picture of you with Xavier Whitman at some fancy gala, and the article says you're the reason he's risking his company. Zuri sank onto the sofa. It's complicated, Mom. Then uncomplicate it for me. You told me you were seeing someone in technology. You didn't mention he was one of the richest men in the country. Would it have mattered? Her mother sighed. Of course not, honey. But I am concerned about seeing my daughter's name in headlines about a corporate power struggle. I know, I'm sorry. Zuri rubbed her forehead. It wasn't supposed to become this public. Are you in love with him? The directness of the question caught Zuri off guard, though it shouldn't have. Her mother had never been one for beating around the bush. Yes, she admitted, and he loves me. And is he worth all this drama? Zuri thought about Xavier's kindness at the community garden, his speech at the gala, the way he'd held her last night as if she were the most precious thing in his world. He is, Mom. He really is. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then I look forward to meeting him, preferably when his face isn't splashed across every business publication in the country. Zuri laughed, despite herself. I'll see what I can arrange. After promising to call with updates, Zuri ended the call and checked the time. The board meeting had been in session for over 2 hours now. What was happening in that conference room? Was Xavier standing his ground? Were they forcing him out? Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Taylor, Xavier's COO, whose number Xavier had added to her contacts, just in case. Meeting still ongoing. X holding firm. Vote likely within the hour. The brief message did little to calm her nerves, but she appreciated the update. She replied with a simple, "Thank you," and resumed her anxious waiting. To distract herself, Zuri called the hospice to check on a few patients she was particularly concerned about. Her colleague Linda updated her on their conditions, then paused. "Zuri, there are reporters calling the hospice asking about you." "What? Why would they?" "Your relationship with Xavier Whitman is big news today. His company is valued at billions, and he's risking it all, apparently because of your influence." Zuri closed her eyes, a wave of dismay washing over her. "I'm so sorry, Linda. I never meant for this to affect work." "Hey, it's not your fault the media vultures have nothing better to do," Linda reassured her. "Just wanted you to know. The administration is handling it, referring all inquiries to the PR department." After hanging up, Zuri paced the penthouse, increasingly uncomfortable. This was Xavier's space, not hers. Being here alone during this crisis felt wrong somehow. She needed to be somewhere else, somewhere that centered her. Making a quick decision, she gathered her things and left, sending Xavier a text that she'd meet him later. There was one place she knew she could find perspective. The community garden was quiet on a Thursday morning, only a few regular volunteers tending to the growing plants. Miss Evelyn looked up from her weeding as Zuri approached, her shrewd eyes assessing. "Thought you might show up today," the older woman said, straightening with a slight groan. "Saw your man on the news this morning." "You did?" Zuri knelt beside her, automatically beginning to weed a row of peppers. They're saying he's gone soft because of you." Miss Evelyn chuckled, as if having principles means a man's gone soft. Zuri worked in silence for a moment, the familiar activity soothing her nerves. "Did I do the right thing, Miss Evelyn? Getting involved with him?" The older woman considered the question, taking her time as she always did with important matters. "Can't answer that for you, child, but I'll tell you what I see. I see a man who looked at the world different after meeting you, not because you demanded it, but because you showed him another way to be. And now he might lose everything he's built." "Might," Miss Evelyn nodded, "or might build something better, something that lasts in a way money and power never will." They worked side by side for another hour, the physical labor and Miss Evelyn's quiet wisdom providing exactly the grounding Zuri needed. When her phone finally rang, Xavier's name appearing on the screen, she answered with soil-stained fingers. "Xavier, how did it go?" "It's over," he said, his voice tired but steady. "Can you meet me?" "Of course. Where?" "The lakefront. Our bench. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Miss Evelyn watched as Zuri gathered her things. "Go to him," she said simply. "Whatever happened, that man needs you now." Their bench was a simple wooden seat overlooking Lake Michigan, where they'd stopped during a long walk a few weeks earlier. Xavier was already there when Zuri arrived, his suit jacket discarded, tie loosened, hair ruffled by the lake breeze. He stood as she approached, and something in his expression made her heart clench. She quickened her pace, reaching for him. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, holding her as if she were an anchor in a storm. "What happened?" she asked softly when he finally loosened his grip. They sat on the bench, Xavier taking a deep breath before speaking. "I'm no longer CEO of Whitman Industries." Despite expecting this possibility, the reality of it hit Zuri hard. "They removed you?" "Not exactly. We reached a compromise. I'll remain as chairman of the board and chief innovation officer, focusing on product development and vision. Marcus will become CEO, handling day-to-day operations and shareholder relations." "And the Singapore deal?" "Proceeds as I proposed it." A hint of satisfaction crossed his face. "That was my non-negotiable condition. We maintain the original mission of accessibility with a longer timeline for profitability." Zuri processed this information, relief mingling with concern. "How do you feel about it?" Xavier gazed out at the lake, sunlight dancing on the water. "Honestly? Relieved. The company has outgrown my interest in managing its daily operations. This arrangement allows me to focus on what I've always loved, creating solutions to real problems, while letting others handle the aspects I've come to dread. So it's not really a demotion?" "The business press will frame it that way," he acknowledged. "Stock prices will probably take another hit initially. But no, in terms of what matters to me, it's not a demotion. It's a recalibration." Zuri studied his profile, searching for signs of regret or resentment. Finding none, she asked, "What happens now?" "Now?" Xavier turned to her, a newfound lightness in his expression. "Now I take a step back, breathe, reconnect with why I started this journey in the first place." He took her hand. "And I spend more time with the woman I love. Are you sure you're okay with all this?" "More than okay." He squeezed her hand gently. For years, I've defined myself by my role as CEO, by the company's growth, by acquisition and expansion. It became a treadmill I couldn't get off, even when I realized it wasn't making me happy anymore. And now you're off the treadmill. Now I'm charting a new path, he corrected. One that allows me to create meaningful impact without sacrificing my soul in the process. His eyes held hers. One that includes you, if you want that. Zuri leaned against him, feeling his solid warmth. I do want that. They sat together, watching the lake shimmer under the afternoon sun. After a comfortable silence, Xavier spoke again. There's something else I've been thinking about, he said, an edge of nervousness in his voice that was unusual for him. My penthouse never felt like a home until you were in it. It's always been just a place I sleep between work commitments. It could use some personal touches, Zuri agreed cautiously, unsure where this was heading. What if we created those touches together? Xavier turned to face her fully. Move in with me, Zuri. Or we can find a new place, something that's ours from the beginning. I don't care about the where, just the who. The proposal caught her off guard. Xavier, we've only known each other a few months. I know, and ordinarily I'd say that's too soon. But nothing about us has been ordinary from the start. His expression was earnest, vulnerable. When you know, and I know that I want to build a life with you. Zuri's heart raced. She loved this man, his complexity, his courage, his willingness to change and grow. But moving in together was a monumental step, especially given the current turmoil surrounding them. Can I think about it? She asked gently. With everything that's happening right now. Of course. Xavier nodded, disappointment flickering briefly in his eyes before he masked it. Take all the time you need, I'm not going anywhere. Zuri kissed him softly. Thank you for understanding. As they walked along the lakefront, hand in hand, Zuri's mind whirled with conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, to dive headfirst into this consuming love they'd found. Another part counseled caution, aware of how quickly their lives had become intertwined, how much upheaval Xavier was experiencing, how the public scrutiny might affect them going forward. Xavier seemed to sense her inner turmoil. Whatever you decide, it won't change how I feel about you, he said quietly. I just want you to be sure. About me. About us. I am sure about you, Zuri replied honestly. It's everything else that's complicated. Later that evening, after they'd had dinner at a quiet restaurant far from the business district, Xavier dropped Zuri at her apartment. She'd suggested they spend the night apart, giving him space to process the day's events and herself time to think about his proposal. Standing at her door, Xavier cupped her face gently. Thank you for being there today. Always, she promised, rising on tiptoes to kiss him goodnight. Inside her apartment, Zuri sank onto her sofa, emotionally exhausted. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Saw the news about Xavier stepping down as CEO? Are you both okay? We're figuring it out, Zuri replied. He seems at peace with the decision. And his offer for you to move in? Have you decided? Zuri blinked in surprise. How did you know about that? Mother's intuition. Plus, it's the logical next step for a man who's reevaluating his life priorities. Despite everything, Zuri smiled at her mother's insight. I told him I need time to think. Smart girl. This isn't a decision to rush, especially with all the current chaos. As Zuri prepared for bed, she found herself drawn to the small box where she kept mementos of her hospice patients, notes they'd written, small gifts they'd given, photos they'd shared. Each item represented a life fully lived, as well as the regrets many had expressed in their final days. Don't wait too long to pursue what matters. Life is shorter than you think. Love is the only thing you can take with you. The wisdom of the dying had shaped her outlook on life, her understanding of what truly mattered. Now, facing this crossroads with Xavier, she found herself returning to these lessons. Yes, their relationship had developed with unusual speed. Yes, the circumstances were complicated by Xavier's professional upheaval and the public scrutiny they faced. But when she stripped away all those external factors and listened to her heart, the answer was clear. She loved Xavier Whitman, not the billionaire CEO, but the man who planted tomatoes with neighborhood children, who listened to Miss Evelyn with genuine respect, who was brave enough to choose integrity over expectation. She loved his complexity, his willingness to grow, the person he was becoming, and life, as her patience had taught her, was too precious to waste in hesitation when the path forward was clear. Zuri reached for her phone, her decision made. Xavier was just drifting off to sleep when his phone lit up with Zuri's name. He reached for it immediately, suddenly wide awake. "Yes," her text read. Just one word. He sat up, heart racing. "Yes, to," he typed back, needing absolute clarity. The dots appeared, indicating she was typing. "Yes to building a home together. Yes to taking this next step. Yes to us." Xavier stared at the message, a smile slowly spreading across his face. He hit the call button, unwilling to continue this conversation via text. "Hey," Zuri answered, her voice soft but certain. "Are you sure?" Xavier asked without preamble. "I don't want you to feel pressured, especially with everything that's happening." "I'm sure," she replied. "Life is too short for hesitation when your heart knows what it wants. And my heart wants you, Xavier." "I'll come get you right now," he said impulsively. Zuri laughed, the sound warming him through the phone. "It's almost midnight. I have an early shift tomorrow, but this weekend we can start figuring out the details." "This weekend," Xavier agreed, his mind already racing ahead. "I love you, Zuri, more than I have words for." "I love you too," she said simply. "Now get some sleep. You've had quite a day." After they hung up, Xavier lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his world simultaneously unraveling and reshaping into something new and infinitely more meaningful. For the first time in his adult life, professional upheaval didn't feel like failure. It felt like transformation, and Zuri would be beside him through it all. The business press might frame today as Xavier Whitman's downfall, but lying alone in his too large bed, he felt nothing but gratitude for the kidney stone that had brought Zuri Johnson into his life and catalyzed the most authentic chapter of his existence. The following weeks brought a flurry of changes. Xavier formally transitioned leadership to Marcus, while carving out his new role as chairman and chief innovation officer. He converted one of his penthouse's unused bedrooms into a home office, focusing on the technological innovations that had ignited his passion in the first place. Meanwhile, Zuri continued her hospice work, refusing to let their relationship change her professional commitment. They settled into a rhythm that accommodated both their demanding careers. Early mornings together when possible, late evenings reconnecting, and precious weekends carved out for each other. The media attention gradually shifted as the business world absorbed Whitman Industries' leadership changes and moved on to fresher controversies. Xavier's decision was dissected in business schools and boardrooms, with opinions split between those who viewed it as a principled stand and others who saw it as a cautionary tale of personal relationships interfering with business judgment. Through it all, Xavier and Zuri remained focused on building their shared life, deciding ultimately to find a new place together rather than adapt his penthouse or her apartment. They wanted a fresh start, a home that reflected both of them from its inception. "What about this one?" Xavier asked one Saturday morning, showing Zuri a listing on his tablet. They were at the community garden, taking a break from planting fall crops. The property was a historic brownstone in a diverse neighborhood not far from the lakefront. Zuri studied the photos. "It's beautiful, but what?" "It's enormous, Xavier. And the price tag—" She shook her head. "That's obscene." He sighed, still adjusting to Zuri's perspective on money. It has space for your family to visit, a garden for growing things, an office for me, and room for—" He hesitated, then forged ahead. "Room for a family someday, if that's something you want." Zuri's expression softened, her hand finding his. "I do want that. Eventually. But let's not get ahead of ourselves." "Too much? Too soon?" He smiled ruefully. "That seems to be my pattern with you." "I prefer to think of it as enthusiasm." She kissed his cheek, leaving a smudge of dirt. "Let's keep looking. Something that feels right for both of us." Miss Evelyn approached, basket of harvested vegetables on her hip. "You too house hunting?" she asked, noting the tablet. "Trying to," Xavier admitted. "We have different priorities." The older woman snorted. "Course you do. She wants practical, you want extravagant. Find the middle ground." Zuri grinned. "See? Miss Evelyn gets it." "Miss Evelyn gets everything," Xavier conceded, having developed a genuine respect for the community matriarch. "Any property advice for us?" "Just this. A house is walls and floors. A home is what you build inside it." She tapped Xavier's chest. "Remember that, Mr. Richman." As Miss Evelyn moved on, Xavier caught Zuri watching him with a tender expression. "What?" he asked. "I just love seeing you like this," she replied. "Relaxed, real, in jeans with dirt on your hands, taking advice from a 78-year-old gardener. I've discovered I actually like receiving wisdom from people with experience," he said, only half joking. "It's more reliable than boardroom posturing." Zuri's phone rang, interrupting their moment. She checked the screen. "It's my mom," she answered, speaking briefly before her expression changed to surprise. "Wait, what? When? Mom, you can't just—" She listened for another moment, then sighed in resignation. "Fine. Yes, we'll be there." Ending the call, she turned to Xavier with a mixture of exasperation and amusement. "So, how do you feel about meeting my family? Tonight?" Xavier raised an eyebrow. "Tonight?" "My parents decided to surprise me with a visit. They're at my apartment now, expecting us for dinner at 6. Zuri ran a hand through her hair. "I suspect my mom engineered this to see you before we announced we're moving in together. Your mother sounds formidable. You have no idea." Zuri bit her lip. "Are you okay with this? I know it's sudden." Xavier thought about his empty social calendar, once packed with business functions and networking events, now deliberately cleared to make space for what truly mattered. "I'd be honored to meet your family," he said sincerely, "though I should probably change first." He gestured to his dirt-stained jeans and t-shirt. Zuri laughed, the sound still his favorite melody. "Yes, that would be wise. My father will already be skeptical of you. No need to show up looking like you've been rolling in the dirt with his daughter." Xavier had faced hostile takeovers, aggressive competitors and skeptical investors, but none had made him as nervous as the prospect of meeting Zuri's parents. He changed 3 times before settling on dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt, casual enough to not seem pretentious, but nice enough to show respect. "Relax," Zuri said as they approached her apartment door. "They're going to love you." "They've read the news articles about me," Xavier reminded her. "About us. That's not the best first impression. They've also heard me talk about the real you." She squeezed his hand. "The one who works in community gardens and rethinks business practices to help more people." Before Xavier could respond, the door opened to reveal a petite woman with Zuri's eyes and warm smile. Beside her stood a tall man with a dignified bearing and a carefully neutral expression. "Mom? Dad?" Zuri said, embracing each of them. "This is Xavier. Xavier, my parents, Drs. Elaine and Michael Johnson." Xavier extended his hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you both." Dr. Michael Johnson's handshake was firm, his assessment direct. "Mr. Whitman, please, call me Xavier." Elaine's welcome was warmer as she ushered them inside. Come in. I've been cooking all day." Zuri's small apartment was transformed by her mother's efforts. The table beautifully set, delicious aromas filling the air, A young man lounged on the sofa, rising as they entered. "And this is my brother Marcus," Zuri said. "The famous Xavier Whitman," Marcus grinned, offering his hand. "Man, I use your company's software every day at the Social Services Department. That case management system revolutionized our workflow." Xavier relaxed slightly at the friendly reception. "I'm glad to hear it's making a difference." "Dinner's ready," Elaine announced. "Let's eat while everything's hot." At the table, conversation flowed more easily than Xavier had anticipated. Elaine was a pediatric neurologist, Michael a professor of music education at Spelman College in Atlanta. They were intelligent, warm, and clearly devoted to their children, and to each other, exchanging affectionate glances that spoke of decades of partnership. "So, Xavier," Michael said during a pause in the conversation, "my daughter tells me you're no longer CEO of your company. Was that a difficult decision?" Zuri tensed beside him, but Xavier appreciated the direct approach. "It was necessary rather than difficult," he answered honestly. "The company needed a direction correction, and this arrangement allows me to focus on innovation rather than administrative duties." "And this direction correction was inspired by Zuri?" Michael pressed. "Dad," Zuri protested. "It's a fair question," Xavier said gently. "Not inspired by Zuri directly, no. But knowing her has reminded me of values I'd let slide in pursuit of corporate growth. Her work, her perspective, her integrity, they've helped me realign my priorities." Michael studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Good answer." "Too good," Marcus joked. "Did you rehearse that in the car, man?" The tension broke as everyone laughed, including Xavier. The conversation shifted to lighter topics. Family stories that made Zuri blush, Marcus's work with at-risk youth, plans for the holidays. "Zuri mentioned you two are looking for a place together," Elaine said as she served homemade peach cobbler for dessert. Xavier glanced at Zuri, who gave a small shrug. Of course she'd told her mother. "We are," he confirmed. "We're still exploring neighborhoods, finding somewhere that feels right for both of us." "That's a big step," Michael observed, his tone carefully neutral. "It is," Xavier agreed. "But when you know you've found your person, you don't want to waste time." "And you believe my daughter is your person?" Michael's gaze was penetrating. Xavier met his eyes steadily. "I know she is. She's the most remarkable woman I've ever met. Compassionate, principled, unimpressed by status or wealth. She's made me a better man, a better leader, a better human being. I love her, sir, completely." A silence fell over the table, everyone watching Michael for his reaction. Finally, the older man's serious expression softened. "Well," he said, "at least you have good taste." Later, helping clean up while Zuri caught up with her brother, Xavier found himself alone in the kitchen with Elaine. "Thank you for dinner," he said. "Everything was delicious." "My pleasure." She studied him as she dried a serving dish. "You know, when I first read about you and Zuri in the papers, I was concerned. Not because of who you are, but because of the scrutiny she might face. I understand. I worry about that too. But seeing you together," Elaine smiled, "the way you look at her, like she's the most precious thing in your world, that tells me what I need to know." "She is," Xavier said simply. "Good." Elaine handed him a stack of plates to put away. "Because that girl has the biggest heart of anyone I know. She gives so much to her patients, to her community. She deserves someone who gives just as much to her." "I'm trying," Xavier admitted. "I'm still learning what that looks like." "Aren't we all?" Elaine patted his arm. "Just keep trying. That's all any of us can do." By the time they left, Xavier had received what felt like tentative approval from Zuri's family. Michael had shaken his hand firmly at the door. Marcus had exchanged phone numbers with promises to catch a Bulls game, and Elaine had hugged him warmly. "That went well," Zuri said as they walked to his car. "I told you they'd like you." "Your father reserved judgment until the very end," Xavier noted. "Dad's protective. But he saw what I see in you. She stopped, turning to face him under a streetlight. "Thank you for tonight, for being yourself with them." Was I? Myself? Xavier realized with surprise that he had been. No corporate mask, no calculated responses, just genuine conversation with people who mattered to the woman he loved. Completely. Zuri rose on tiptoes to kiss him softly. "That's how I knew, that this us is right. Because I can be myself with your family? Because you can be yourself, period. With me, with them, with Miss Evelyn, with everyone." She took his hand as they continued walking. "That's a gift, Xavier. One not everyone finds." That night, returning to his penthouse alone, Zuri had an early shift. Xavier reflected on the evening. The Johnson family's warmth and genuine connection had highlighted what had been missing in his own life for so long. Not luxury or achievement or recognition, but belonging, community, love without conditions or expectations. He wandered through his impeccably designed, emotionally sterile penthouse, seeing it through new eyes. Soon, this wouldn't be his home anymore. Soon, he and Zuri would create their own space, their own family culture, their own center of belonging. For the first time in years, Xavier thought about his mother, what she would think of Zuri, of the changes in his life, of his shifting priorities. She had always emphasized character over achievement, service over accumulation. In her final days, suffering through cancer treatments, she had whispered, "Success isn't what you have, Xavier, it's who you become." Standing at his floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the glittering city below, Xavier finally understood what she'd meant. Success wasn't Whitman Industries or his billions or his influence. Success was becoming a man who could be worthy of a woman like Zuri Johnson. A man who stood up for his principles, who valued connection over acquisition, who measured his worth by the lives he improved rather than the wealth he amassed. With that realization came a profound sense of peace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, and there would be many as they built their life together, he was finally on the right path. 3 months later, Xavier stood in the empty living room of their new home, watching the movers carry in the last of their combined possessions. The house they'd chosen was a surprise to everyone, including themselves. Not a luxurious downtown penthouse or a historic brownstone, but a light-filled 4-bedroom craftsman in a diverse, established neighborhood, close enough to the city for convenient commutes, but with enough yard space for the garden Zuri wanted. "What are you thinking?" Zuri asked, appearing beside him with 2 mugs of coffee. Xavier accepted one gratefully. "That we made the right choice." She followed his gaze around the room with its original woodwork, large windows, and built-in bookshelves. "It feels like a home already." "It does," he agreed, "though I still think the guest house was unnecessary." Zuri smiled, bumping her shoulder against his arm. "My parents need somewhere to stay when they visit, and so does Marcus, unless you want them in the bedroom next to ours." Xavier shuddered theatrically. Point taken. They had compromised on nearly every aspect of the house. Xavier had initially shown her properties that were essentially mansions, expansive, luxurious, and completely impractical for 2 people. Zuri had countered with modest homes that Xavier worried would feel cramped. The craftsman had been their middle ground, comfortable without being ostentatious, with character and warmth that felt right to both of them. The purchase price had been another negotiation. Xavier could have bought the house with what amounted to pocket change for him. Zuri had insisted on contributing proportionally to her income. They'd finally agreed that Xavier would purchase the property, while Zuri would be responsible for furnishing their home. It wasn't an equal financial arrangement, but it respected her need for independence and his desire to provide. Now, with the movers finished and the afternoon stretching before them, they wandered through the rooms of their new home, planning where everything would go, which spaces would serve which purposes. "This should be your office," Zuri said, leading him into a corner room with windows on 2 sides overlooking the backyard. "Natural light, privacy, enough space for all your tech." Xavier nodded, already picturing his workstation. "And this one for you," he suggested, showing her a smaller but equally bright room across the hall. "For your reading, your charting when you bring work home, maybe someday for writing those memoirs you've talked about." Zuri squeezed his hand, touched that he remembered her occasional mentions of someday collecting her hospice experiences into a book. Perfect. They continued upstairs, where the primary bedroom suite occupied one end of the house. The movers had already assembled their new bed, a purchase they'd made together, neither wanting to use pieces from their previous lives. "Should we christen it?" Xavier suggested with a mischievous smile, pulling her close. "With the movers still bringing in boxes?" Zuri laughed. "Patience, Mr. Whitman." "Patience has never been my strong suit, Ms. Johnson." He kissed her neck, sending pleasant shivers down her spine. "Especially when it comes to you." Before she could respond, Xavier's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and sighed. "It's Marcus, probably about the Singapore implementation." "Take it," Zuri encouraged. "I'll start unpacking the kitchen." Xavier answered as Zuri headed downstairs, their connected yet independent rhythms already establishing themselves in their new space. Their life together was falling into place with surprising ease despite the occasional adjustments required when two self-sufficient adults with established habits merged their lives. Later that evening, exhausted but satisfied with their progress, they sat on the floor of their living room eating takeout Thai food. Most of the kitchen was unpacked. The bedroom was functional, and they'd made enough headway to feel accomplished. "I spoke with Miss Evelyn today," Zuri said between bites of pad thai. "She's coming tomorrow with some of her special compost for the garden beds." Xavier smiled. "Of course she is. I'm surprised she didn't insist on helping us move." "She wanted to. I told her we had professionals for the heavy lifting but would welcome her expertise for the garden." Zuri set down her container. She also shared some neighborhood history. Apparently there used to be block parties here every summer. Potlucks, music, kids playing. The tradition died out about 10 years ago. "That's a shame." "I thought so too." Zuri's expression turned thoughtful. "What if we revived it? Hosted the first one here as a way to meet our neighbors and become part of the community?" Xavier considered the suggestion. 6 months ago, the idea of hosting a neighborhood block party would have seemed absurd to him, an unnecessary distraction from more important pursuits. Now it felt not just reasonable, but appealing. "I think that's a wonderful idea," he said, "though I should warn you, my grilling skills are questionable at best. We'll rope Marcus into helping. My brother's a grilling master." Zuri leaned against him, her head finding the comfortable spot on his shoulder. "I want this to be a real home, Xavier. Not just a beautiful house where we sleep, but a place where we build community." "It will be," he promised, kissing the top of her head. "Speaking of community, there's something I've been meaning to discuss with you." Zuri straightened, noting his serious tone. "What is it?" "The foundation," Xavier began. "With my new role at Whitman Industries, I have more time to focus on its direction. Right now, it's primarily funding educational technology initiatives, but I've been thinking about expanding its scope." "In what way?" "Healthcare access, particularly end-of-life care." His eyes met hers. "Seeing your work, understanding the difference compassionate hospice makes for patients and families, it's made me realize there's a significant gap in services for those without resources or insurance." Zuri's expression softened. "You want to fund hospice initiatives?" "I was thinking more along the lines of creating a new division within the foundation, specifically focused on expanding access to quality end-of-life care in underserved communities." Xavier took her hand. "And I was hoping you might consider leading it." Zuri blinked, clearly surprised. "Me?" "Xavier, I'm a hospice nurse, not a foundation director." "Exactly. You have the frontline experience, the passion, and the perspective to build something meaningful." He squeezed her hand gently. "You've often said you wonder if you're doing enough, if there's a way to create wider impact. This could be it. shaping policy, directing resources, training new providers. I don't know what to say. Zuri looked overwhelmed. I love my direct patient care, the one-on-one connections, being there in those sacred moments. You wouldn't have to give that up entirely, Xavier clarified. We could structure it so you maintain some clinical hours, but your expertise could help shape programs that reach thousands, not dozens. Zuri fell silent, processing the proposal. Xavier watched the emotions play across her expressive face. Excitement, hesitation, uncertainty, possibility. It's a lot to consider, she finally said. Can I think about it? Of course. Xavier brushed a strand of hair from her face. No pressure, no timeline, it's just an idea. They finished their dinner discussing lighter topics, furniture arrangements, paint colors for the guest rooms, plans for the weekend. But Xavier could tell Zuri was still turning over his proposal in her mind, weighing possibilities against practicalities. Later, as they lay in their new bed, the house settling around them with unfamiliar creaks and sounds, Zuri turned to face him in the darkness. "Tell me more about this foundation idea," she said softly. "What exactly do you envision?" Xavier rolled onto his side, their faces close on adjacent pillows. "I envision a program that identifies gaps in hospice access and fills them, training for providers in underserved communities, resources for families caring for loved ones at home, advocacy for policy changes to expand coverage." "That's ambitious." "It is," he acknowledged. "But so was building Whitman Industries from a garage startup. The difference is that this would create lasting human impact, not just technological or financial returns." Zuri was quiet for a moment. "I'd want to keep at least part-time clinical work. Being with patients grounds me, reminds me why any of this matters." "Absolutely." Xavier felt a flicker of hope at her tentative engagement with the idea. "We could structure it however works best for you. And I'd want a diverse advisory board, people with different perspectives on end-of-life care, from different cultural and economic backgrounds." "We'd build that from the ground up," Xavier agreed. "Your vision, your leadership." Zuri reached out, her hand finding his in the darkness. "I'll think about it. Seriously, it's an incredible opportunity to expand access to the kind of care everyone deserves." Xavier brought her hand to his lips. "That's all I ask. And whatever you decide, I'll support you completely." They fell asleep hand in hand, the first night in their new home marked by dreams of both personal and professional futures intertwining. The next few weeks passed in a blur of unpacking, organizing, and settling in. Xavier's transition to his new role at Whitman Industries was progressing smoothly, with Marcus handling the CEO responsibilities effectively while Xavier focused on the innovation pipeline. The stock price had stabilized after its initial drop, and the Singapore deal was unfolding according to the revised plan, with early data showing promising adoption rates in underserved communities. Zuri continued her hospice work while considering Xavier's foundation proposal. She spent her days off meeting with healthcare policy experts, researching models for expanding hospice access, and discussing possibilities with colleagues who had moved from clinical practice to administrative roles. Their home gradually transformed from a collection of boxes and mismatched furniture to a warm, inviting space that reflected both their personalities. Xavier's modern aesthetic blended surprisingly well with Zuri's more eclectic, comfortable style. The garden took shape under Miss Evelyn's guidance, and they made efforts to meet their neighbors, laying groundwork for the block party they planned to host in late summer. One Wednesday evening, Xavier arrived home to find Zuri sitting in the garden, a thoughtful expression on her face. He joined her on the bench they'd placed beneath a mature oak tree, waiting for her to speak. "I've made a decision," she finally said, "about the foundation role." Xavier nodded, careful to keep his expression neutral despite his eager anticipation. "I want to do it," Zuri continued. "But with conditions. I'll direct the new healthcare division, But I want to maintain 1 day a week of direct patient care. And I want complete autonomy in building the program, selecting the team, establishing priorities, allocating resources. Relief and joy washed over Xavier. Done. All of it. Whatever you need to make this successful. It won't be easy, Zuri warned. Expanding hospice access means confronting systemic healthcare inequities, insurance limitations, cultural barriers around death and dying. The hardest problems are usually the most important ones to solve, Xavier replied. And there's no one better equipped to tackle this than you. Zuri leaned against him, her expression a mixture of excitement and trepidation. This is going to change everything, isn't it? My career, our life together, your foundation's direction. For the better, Xavier assured her, just like you changed me for the better. Sometimes the most unexpected turns lead to the most meaningful destinations. As the sunset painted their garden in golden light, Xavier marveled at how completely his life had transformed in just 6 months. From a driven CEO focused on growth and market dominance to a man building a meaningful life with an extraordinary woman, redirecting his resources and influence toward initiatives that truly mattered. All because a kidney stone and a compassionate nurse had brought them together at exactly the right moment. A coincidence that felt increasingly like destiny with each passing day. 1 year later, the community garden bloomed with summer abundance. Tomato vines heavy with fruit, cucumber plants sprawling across their trellises, zinnias and sunflowers adding splashes of vibrant color among the vegetables. Beneath a canopy set up to provide shade from the July sun, Zuri directed volunteers filling gift bags with produce and flowers. Make sure every bag has at least 2 tomatoes, she instructed a young volunteer. Miss Evelyn says they're the best crop this year. Bossing everyone around again? Xavier teased, approaching with an ice chest. He set it down beside the snack table, already laden with homemade dishes contributed by neighbors and garden volunteers. Someone has to maintain order, Zuri replied with a smile. Did you get the extra ice? 2 bags, as requested. Xavier surveyed the bustling garden with satisfaction. What had once been a modest community project had expanded to nearly twice its original size, with new irrigation systems, raised beds accessible to elderly and disabled gardeners, and a small greenhouse for starting seedlings and extending the growing season. Most of the improvements had been funded by a grant from the Whitman Foundation, though Xavier had insisted his name appear nowhere on the project. Miss Evelyn approached, her movements slower these days but her eyes as sharp as ever. There you are, X. Need your muscles over by the compost bins. New delivery needs spreading before this heat bakes it solid. Yes, ma'am, Xavier replied, genuine respect in his voice. He kissed Zuri quickly before following the older woman to the far corner of the garden. Watching them go, Zuri felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. The past year had been transformative in ways she couldn't have imagined when she first gave up her seat to a pain-stricken millionaire on that fateful flight. Xavier had flourished in his new role at Whitman Industries, focusing on innovation and long-term strategy while Marcus handled daily operations. The Singapore project had become a case study in ethical business practices, providing affordable internet access to previously underserved regions while still delivering modest but sustainable returns to shareholders. More importantly, it had established a new model for the company's international ventures, one that balanced profit with purpose. Meanwhile, Zuri had built the healthcare equity division of the Whitman Foundation from the ground up, starting with a pilot program in Chicago that expanded hospice services to 3 underserved neighborhoods. They were now replicating the model in 5 additional cities. She'd assembled a diverse team of healthcare providers, policy experts, and community advocates, all committed to ensuring that end-of-life care was available to everyone, regardless of income or zip code. True to her condition, she still maintained her clinical practice 1 day a week, working directly with hospice patients. These days grounded her, reminding her of the human impact behind the policies and programs she was developing. Earth to Zuri, called Tasha, her friend from nursing school who now worked alongside her at the foundation. "The volunteer coordinator needs the schedule for next week." "Right here," Zuri replied, retrieving a folder from her bag. As she handed it over, she caught sight of Xavier across the garden, patiently listening to Miss Evelyn's detailed instructions on proper compost management. The sight still made her heart skip. This powerful man who had redirected his considerable intellect and resources toward making the world better, one community garden and one healthcare initiative at a time. Their home had become exactly what they'd hoped, a warm, welcoming place where they hosted dinner parties for friends, planning sessions for foundation projects, and regular visits from Zuri's family. The guest house had proven useful after all, especially when her parents came for extended stays. Her father collaborating with local music programs while her mother consulted with pediatric neurologists at Chicago's hospitals. The neighborhood block party they'd revived had been a resounding success, bringing together families who had lived side by side for years without really knowing each other. Now in its second year, it had expanded to include a community health fair organized by Zuri, offering screenings and resources to residents who might otherwise lack access to preventive care. "Hey, beautiful," Xavier's voice interrupted her thoughts as he returned from his compost duties, wiping his hands on a towel. "Miss Evelyn says we need to start the distribution soon. The ice cream for the kids won't last in this heat." Zuri checked her watch. "You're right. Can you round up the volunteers for a quick briefing?" Within minutes, the team was assembled, a mix of regular garden volunteers, neighborhood residents, and staff from the foundation. Today marked the first harvest distribution of the summer, providing fresh produce to elderly residents and families in need throughout the area. "Remember," Zuri instructed, "this isn't charity, it's community. Everyone contributes what they can: time, labor, resources, skills, and everyone benefits. Make sure people feel that dignity in every interaction." Xavier watched from the edge of the group, pride swelling in his chest. Zuri's natural leadership, her ability to inspire and organize while maintaining focus on human dignity, continued to amaze him. When the volunteers dispersed to their stations, he joined her at the distribution table. "Ready for the rush?" he asked. Before she could answer, a familiar voice called out, "There's my favorite power couple." They turned to see Marcus Johnson approaching, arms laden with canvas bags. Zuri's brother had moved to Chicago 6 months earlier, taking a position with the city's social services department while also serving on the advisory board of the foundation's healthcare equity division. "Just in time," Zuri said, hugging him. "We need someone to run the cooking demonstration." "That's why I'm here," Marcus replied cheerfully. "Nothing sells vegetables like showing people how delicious they can be." He nodded to Xavier. "How's it going, man? Ready for tomorrow?" Xavier's expression betrayed a hint of nervousness. "As ready as I'll ever be." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "You've got this. And if you don't, well, I'll be there to pick up the pieces." He winked at Zuri before heading to the demonstration area, leaving Xavier looking mildly alarmed. "Your brother enjoys tormenting me," Xavier observed. "It's how he shows affection," Zuri assured him, straightening his shirt collar. "And he's right. You'll be brilliant tomorrow." Tomorrow. The thought sent butterflies through Xavier's stomach. After months of preparation, he would be testifying before a congressional committee on healthcare access initiatives, advocating for policy changes to expand hospice coverage to underserved populations. It was a far cry from his previous congressional appearances, which had focused on technology regulation and market competition. "I still think you should be the one testifying," he said to Zuri. "You're the heart of this work." "And you're the voice they'll listen to," she replied pragmatically. "Like it or not, those senators will pay more attention to the billionaire tech entrepreneur than to the hospice nurse, no matter how much more I know about the subject. That's exactly the problem we're trying to solve. And we will," Zuri said confidently. "One step at a time. Your testimony is just the beginning. The distribution began with community members arriving to collect their produce and participate in the various educational activities set up around the garden. Xavier and Zuri worked side by side, greeting people, answering questions, and ensuring everything ran smoothly. As the event wound down, Miss Evelyn approached them again, this time with a small girl in tow, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, with bright eyes and a serious expression. "This is Jasmine," Miss Evelyn introduced. "She has a question for you two." Xavier crouched down to the child's level. "Hello, Jasmine. What can we help you with?" The girl clutched a bag of vegetables, looking between them uncertainly. "Miss Evelyn says you're the people who helped make our garden bigger." "We contributed," Xavier said carefully, "but it's Miss Evelyn and all the volunteers who really make it work." Jasmine nodded, considering this. "My grandma can't walk good anymore, but she loves gardening. Miss Evelyn says the new high beds are so she can still grow things without bending down." "That's right," Zuri confirmed, joining Xavier at the girl's level. "The raised beds are designed for people who have trouble kneeling or bending." "Grandma's really happy about it," Jasmine said solemnly. "She cried when she saw them. Happy tears, though." Xavier felt something tighten in his chest. This simple, tangible improvement in one elderly woman's life meant more to him than any business deal he'd ever closed. "I'm glad they make your grandma happy," he said. "That's exactly why we built them." Jasmine nodded again, then abruptly thrust a small, slightly wilted bouquet of zinnias toward them. "These are from our part of the garden. Grandma says to say thank you." As Xavier accepted the flowers, Miss Evelyn gave him a knowing look. "Told you this would be more satisfying than another tech gadget, didn't I?" "You did," Xavier acknowledged. "As usual, you were right." After Jasmine ran off to rejoin her grandmother, Miss Evelyn fixed them both with her penetrating gaze. "You two did good here. Not just the garden, everything. You're good together." Coming from Miss Evelyn, this was high praise indeed. "Thank you," Zuri said, genuinely moved. "Now," the older woman continued briskly, "when are you going to make it official? I'm not getting any younger, and I want to see you married before I go to glory." Xavier choked slightly, while Zuri burst out laughing. "Miss Evelyn, that's between us, don't you think? If I waited for you young people to sort yourselves out, I'd be waiting forever," she retorted. "Life's too short for hesitation. You know that better than most, girl." With that parting wisdom, she shuffled away to supervise the cleanup, leaving Xavier and Zuri in stunned silence. "She's not wrong," Xavier finally said, "about life being too short." Zuri studied his face. "What are you saying, Xavier?" "I'm saying—" He hesitated, then reached into his pocket. "This isn't how I planned to do this. I had an elaborate setup for next weekend. Dinner, music, the whole romantic scenario." "Xavier?" He pulled out a small velvet box, and Zuri's breath caught. Right there, among the tomato plants and zinnias, with compost on his shoes and sweat on his brow, Xavier Whitman got down on one knee. "I had a speech prepared," he admitted, "with carefully chosen words and probably too many metaphors about growth and nurturing. But the truth is simpler than all that." He opened the box, revealing a ring that managed to be both elegant and understated, a perfect reflection of Zuri herself. "I love you, Zuri Johnson. You changed my life by showing me what really matters. You challenge me, support me, make me laugh, make me think. Will you marry me?" Zuri looked from the ring to the man kneeling before her. This complex, evolving, generous man who had journeyed so far from the pain-stricken CEO she'd first met on that plane. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain despite the tears gathering in her eyes. "Absolutely yes." Xavier slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood to gather her in his arms. Their kiss was witnessed by the remaining volunteers, who erupted in cheers and applause. Marcus whooped loudly from the cooking station, while Miss Evelyn nodded in satisfied approval. Later that evening, as they sat on the porch of their home, watching fireflies rise from the garden they'd planted together, Xavier held Zuri close. "Happy?" he asked. "Completely," she replied, her head resting against his shoulder, her newly ringed hand entwined with his. "You know, when I gave up that first-class seat, I never imagined where it would lead." "No?" He smiled against her hair. "I think part of me knew, even then, not consciously but somewhere deeper, that this extraordinarily compassionate woman who cared for a stranger in pain was someone I needed in my life. It was just my job," Zuri reminded him, echoing her words from that first day. "It was never just a job for you," Xavier countered. "It was who you are, and who you are is exactly who I needed to become myself." As night fell fully around them, they remained on the porch talking quietly about tomorrow's testimony, upcoming foundation projects, wedding plans, future dreams. Two people from different worlds who had found in each other not just love but purpose, a shared vision of making their corner of the world better, one garden, one patient, one policy change at a time. The kidney stone that had once caused Xavier such agony had become improbably the greatest gift of his life, bringing him not just relief from physical pain, but healing for the deeper wounds of isolation, purpose, disconnection, and misplaced priorities that had afflicted him without his even knowing. And Zuri, who had always sought to bring comfort to others in their most vulnerable moments, had found in Xavier someone who saw her completely, valued her wisdom, and amplified her impact beyond what she could have achieved alone. Together they had created something neither could have imagined separately, a life of authentic purpose, meaningful connection, and love that transformed not just themselves, but everyone and everything they touched. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.